Huge thanks to fellow Taoist Sang Ha for the donation. This support means a lot to me. The countless streaks of sword chi released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were sent hurtling through the air at Han Li's behest, sweeping toward the thousands of oncoming stone swords. A rapid string of loud clangs rang out as the sword projections released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were rapidly eradicated, and it took dozens of them to destroy a single stone sword. Thankfully, the number of the sword projections released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords far exceeded that of the stone swords, so they were able to hold their own for now. There was a solemn look on Han Li's face as he made a rapid string of hand seals, and the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords flew forward in a steady manner at his behest, forming a giant net of swordlight that forced back the opposing stone swords. Before long, the vast majority of the sword projections released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had already been destroyed, while the number of opposing stone swords had also been whittled down to fewer than 40. However, the clashes between them were still as fierce as ever, and Han Li was gritting his teeth tightly as large droplets of sweat began to bead up on his forehead. All of a sudden, he let loose a low roar as he injected his immortal spiritual power into his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords in a frenzy, and countless arcs of golden lightning erupted out of them to destroy most of the remaining stone swords in an instant. All that remained were the 8 original stone swords, and they were still hovering in the sky with their tips aimed directly at him. At the same time, the number of sword projections released by the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had been reduced to fewer than 90. Han Li's eyes lit up slightly as he took a step forward to step onto the altar, but right at this moment, the yellow stones embedded onto the sides of the altar abruptly lit up. The 8 stone swords in the air shuddered violently, as if they had just received a potent injection of power, and radiant, yellow light erupted out of them to eradicate all of the remaining azure bamboo cloud swarm sword projections in an instant. The 36 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were able to keep 7 of the stone swords at bay, but the 8th one was able to slip through the cracks, and in the blink of an eye, it was no more than 10 feet away from Han Li's chest. Han Li immediately channeled his reversal true axis ability while stepping to the side, and the stone sword just barely flew past his ribcage, tearing a large gash into his robe. He hurriedly made a beckoning motion toward his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords while taking a step back, but right at this moment, all of the stones embedded onto the sides of the altar suddenly turned completely dim before shattering into pieces. The 7 stone swords in the sky also tumbled to the ground, seemingly having been drained of all power. It appeared that the law powers within the stones had already been completely exhausted over the course of the countless years that the altar had been standing, and a relieved look appeared on Han Li's face as he prepared to step onto the altar again. However, his expression then suddenly changed slightly as he hurriedly looked down at his own waist. Blood was seeping into the torn section of his robe, but the gash wasn't very deep. However, as Han Li pulled back his robe to inspect the wound, he discovered that it had turned a lifeless, gray color, and that it was as cold and hard as stone to the touch. It immediately occurred to him that his wound had to have been petrified by the earth law powers within the stone sword. Thankfully, as aforementioned, the gash wasn't very deep, and the petrified area was only around an inch in size. Han Li severed the affected piece of skin and flesh from his own body with his finger, and the newly formed wound began to heal on its own. After that, he stowed all of his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, and he was just about to make his way onto the altar when he heard a burst of rumbling ringing out nearby. It seemed that someone else had also found the formation core and was on their way here. With that in mind, he hurriedly stepped onto the altar without any hesitation, then grabbed onto the octagonal jade plate before pulling it out of the altar. He inspected the jade plate briefly with his spiritual sense, following which an ecstatic look appeared on his face. This octagonal jade plate was none other than the Almighty Sword formation diagram that had been taken from the Almighty Sword sect by Immortal Lord Tai Sui, and it was far more complex and profound than Han Li had imagined. Even after just a brief inspection, Han Li could tell that this was a priceless treasure, and he hurriedly stowed it away. In the next instant, a resounding boom rang out from above, and Han Li looked up to discover that the heavenly gates in the sky had swung shut, while the yellow clouds around it were quickly fading away. All of the giant swords falling from the sky had already vanished, and the entire formation was beginning to disintegrate. The suffocating pressure in the air was slowly abating, but the chaotic mist in the area still lingered for now. However, the earth law powers within it were already completely undetectable. Han Li stepped down from the altar, and he was just about to take a pill when a voice rang out from behind him. "Thank you for your hard work in breaking the formation, fellow Taoist Han." Han Li turned around to discover Lei Yus approaching him with a smile, and as he did so, he swept a sleeve through the air, casually stowing away the 8 stone swords scattered over the ground. "I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own," Han Li replied with a smile. "You're far too modest, fellow Taoist Han," Lei Yus continued, and Han Li merely smiled again and offered no response. A hesitant look appeared on Lei Yus's face, following which he said, "Fellow Taoist Han, I have a request for you." Han Li could already guess what Lei Yus wanted, but he put on an oblivious facade as he asked, "What is it, fellow Taoist Lei?" "I'm assuming that you saw a sword formation diagram while breaking the formation. That's a long-lost treasure that's extremely important to our Almighty Sword sect, and I'm hoping that you can return it to me. Of course, our Almighty Sword sect will compensate you handsomely in exchange," Lei Yus said as he cupped his fist in a salute. Han Li feigned a perplexed expression as he said, "I've only just managed to free myself from the sword formation, and I'm afraid I saw no formation diagram or anything of the sort." "Fellow Taoist Han, the sword formation is one of an extremely high caliber, but for you, it's nothing more than a powerful sword formation, while to our Almighty Sword sect it holds great symbolic importance, so please return it to me. I'm willing to give you a 5th-tier immortal treasure in exchange, and on top of that, you can receive the benefits granted to the inner sect elders of our sect without having to perform any of the obligations," Lei Yus insisted. This was a tremendous amount of compensation, and it was certainly true that Lei Yus was displaying the utmost sincerity. However, this almighty sword formation was simply far too appealing to Han Li to pass up. If he could unleash it using his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, then it would most definitely become another powerful trump card of his. With that in mind, Han Li feigned a disappointed expression as he replied, "I appreciate the kind offer, but I'm afraid I truly have not seen this formation diagram that you speak of. The terms that you offered are extremely appealing to me, but I can't bring myself to lie to you for my own personal gain." Lei Yus raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, and he asked, "Did you really not see a formation diagram on this altar, fellow Taoist Han?" "No, there were only those 8 stone swords on the altar, and I didn't even get a chance to look at them before you took them," Han Li replied with a wry smile. Lei Yus remained silent as he scrutinized Han Li intently, trying to see if there were any holes in his facade, but it appeared that he really was telling the truth. "If there's nothing else that you wish to speak to me about, then how about we go and explore the Ian Palace, fellow Taoist Lei?" Han Li suggested. Lei Yus's brows furrowed tightly as he suddenly made a hand seal while chanting an incantation, and a white jade badge that was strapped to his waist abruptly lit up. At the same time, a storage ring on Han Li's finger also began to flash rhythmically, and that was the storage ring that was holding the octagonal jade plate. "Are you really not willing to return the formation diagram, fellow Taoist Han?" Lei Yus asked. "I've already done you a favor by allowing you to take those stone swords, so I suggest that you don't try to push me any further. If you want to try and take the formation diagram from me by force, then go ahead. I certainly wouldn't mind recovering those stone swords for myself," Han Li replied in a cold voice, then passed through the plaza and made his way onto the stone steps leading up to the Ian Palace. Lei Yus remained standing on the spot, with a look of mixed emotions in his eyes. At this point, the mist on the plaza had already faded away, and everyone was beginning to converge toward the Ian Plaza. Lei Yus heaved an internal sigh at the sight, as he suppressed the anger in his heart. There were still more important things that he had to do in the palace, so he had to focus on the task at hand. Upon reaching the top of the stone staircase, Han Li arrived before the palace, and his brows immediately furrowed slightly at the sight that he was greeted by. Every single brick and pillar was etched with runes that resonated with one another to form a massive formation, all of which were designed to fortify the palace, making it as structurally resilient as a powerful, immortal treasure. However, there were no other restrictions at the entrance of the palace, and Han Li was able to push its gates open with ease. He stepped into the palace, then looked around to discover that its interior was far larger than he had imagined. Directly up ahead was a huge, pentagonal stone platform that was tapered from the bottom to the top, giving it the appearance of an upside-down pentagonal bowl. The stone platform had a total of 5 sides, each of which was constructed from a different material, and they were golden, azure, blue, crimson, and yellow in color. At the center of each side was engraved a strange-looking rune, and the structure also appeared to have been an altar. Han Li could see an antiquated golden lamp on the platform. The lamp post was slightly curved like the stalk of a lotus flower, while the lamp itself resembled a budding lotus flower, at the center of which was a small, golden flame. The lamp was radiating golden light that formed a hemispherical protective barrier that encompassed the entire altar, and even though Han Li was standing some distance away from the altar, he could sense the waves of time law power fluctuations emanating from the golden lamp. "Is that the Ian divine lamp? It sure is giving off some formidable time law power fluctuations." Right at this moment, Worm 3 and the others entered the palace, accompanied by Chi Mozi, Xing Shan, and the 5 devilish beings. Chi Mozi's gaze was immediately drawn to the Ian divine lamp as soon as he stepped into the palace, while the 5 devilish beings were looking at the 5-colored altar with fearful looks on their faces. Right as everyone's attention was drawn to the lamp and the altar, 2 streaks of light, on black and one white, flew into the palace, then vanished into the ground. Han Li's expression darkened slightly as he cast his gaze toward Chi Mozi and the others, but right at this moment, Chi Mozi suddenly proposed through voice transmission, "Fellow Taoist Han, I suggest a temporary truce while we're in this Ian Palace. What do you say?" "I was about to suggest the same thing," Han Li immediately replied without any hesitation. Of course, he had no trust in Chi Mozi, but as long as Chi Mozi didn't attack him, he was happy to avoid a battle. After all, given the presence of so many people, the situation was very complex, and a battle against Chi Mozi here would only be detrimental to him. In Han Li's eyes, self-preservation was an objective that had to be prioritized above all else, including his personal differences with Chi Mozi and his desire to obtain the Ian divine lamp. "The bonded soul tablets are also here," Fox 3 suddenly said, and sure enough, there were 3 palm-sized crimson tablets placed in an orderly fashion within the shadow cast by the golden light emanating from the Ian divine lamp. Those were clearly the bonded soul badges of Kalin, Lekima, and the azure-robed man. There was also a triangular, black tablet placed next to the 3 bonded soul tablets, and there seemed to have been something etched onto its surface, but it was rather blurry and indistinct. Hanli noticed that Worm 3's attention was primarily drawn to the Ian Divine lamp and the black tablet. A curious look appeared in his eyes upon seeing this, but he chose not to ask any questions. Additionally, there was also a rolled-up golden scroll on the altar, and it was loosely bound by a length of thin, golden string. A hint of clear excitement flashed through Lei Yuse's eyes at the sight of the golden scroll, and he exchanged an ecstatic glance with Wen Zhang, indicating that the scroll was something of great importance to the Almighty Sword Sect. As Hanli swept his gaze over everyone present, he couldn't help but wonder where Lin was. Before he had a chance to ponder this matter any further, the entire palace suddenly shuddered violently, and its gates swung shut on their own. At the same time, dazzling golden light began to ripple through the air around the palace, and the entire surrounding area was enshrouded in bursts of formidable time-law power fluctuations. Everyone felt as if they had been thrust into a golden space in which the flow of time had slowed down significantly. As a result, their thoughts and spiritual sense had all been severely restricted. Hanli immediately made a hand seal, and a burst of golden light erupted out of his body before rapidly expanding to encompass Lei Yuse and the others, while Qi Mozi also released his spirit domain to encompass Xing Shan and the 5 devilish beings. The spirit domains restored everyone's ability to think clearly, but the speed of movement was still severely hampered. Right at this moment, a massive ring of light suddenly appeared on the ground in front of everyone, following which a series of blurry humanoid figures emerged one after another. All of these humanoid figures were as tall and thin as bamboo poles, and they were clad in suits of ill-fitting golden armor that clattered as they walked. All of them were Tao warriors that appeared thin and frail, but they were giving off formidable auras. To everyone's surprise, instead of attacking right away, the Tao warriors spread themselves out in an orderly fashion to form layers upon layers of encirclements around everyone. Before long, the Tao warriors had already arranged themselves into a formation, and as soon as the formation took shape, blinding golden light began to radiate from their suits of armor. Hanli felt a sharp pain in his eyes from the overwhelming brightness, and he hurriedly narrowed his eyes while channeling his infernal devilish eyes. A protective, purple film seemed to have appeared over his eyes, making the blinding, golden light more bearable to look at, and everyone else was also adopting their own measures to protect their eyes against the golden radiance. Hanli could see streams of runes of different colors flowing out of the armor worn by the Tao warriors, and these streams of runes transformed into bursts of light of different colors that surged back into the Tao warriors' bodies. With these influxes of light, the Tao warriors began to undergo strange transformations. One group of Tao warriors received an influx of azure light, and their bodies quickly swelled to around twice their original size, while each of them also acquired an azure longsword. The neighboring group of Tao warriors received an influx of yellow light, and their bodies swelled to thrice their original size, while also transforming into imposing stone golems with massive stone hammers in their hands. The influx of blue light liquefied the suits of armor worn by the affected Tao warriors, turning them into puddles of golden liquid that flowed down the Tao warriors' bodies and onto the ground below. As for the crimson light, that set the suits of armor worn by the Tao warriors alight, while also granting each of them a large, fiery saber. Only the Tao warriors that received an influx of golden light didn't take on any physical changes, but each of them had been equipped with a corkscrew-tipped golden spear. What's going on? How are there Tao warriors of so many different attributes here at once? Worm 3 exclaimed with an incredulous expression. Every single one of these Tao warriors is comparable in power to a golden immortal, and there has to be at least 500 of them here. On top of that, all of them are enhanced by the law powers of the 5 elements. How is this possible? Fox 3 exclaimed. Looks like I had too low an opinion of that old bastard, Tai Sui, Chi Mozi mused. What's going on here, fellow Taoist Lei? Lan Yuanzi asked. I don't know either, Lei Yus replied, clearly also very much taken aback by this turn of events. He was the one who knew the most about the Ian Pagoda out of everyone present, but even so, he had still been surprised on many occasions, so his knowledge of the Ian Pagoda was clearly far from comprehensive. The Tao warriors have taken on transformations of different attributes because the formation that they've set up is resonating with that 5 elemental altar, Han Li analyzed. You're saying that the altar is the thing that gave rise to all these transformations? Worm 3 asked. It's more accurate to say that these Tao warriors are drawing upon the power of the 5 elemental altar to enhance themselves, Han Li corrected. Right at this moment, the blinding, golden light faded away, and the 5-colored Tao warriors pounced at Han Li's group with their weapons raised. These Tao warriors appeared to be charging forward in a rather chaotic fashion, but in reality, they were displaying exceptional teamwork, and there were no holes in their formation to be exploited at all. Everyone quickly realized this, and they hurriedly adopted defensive formations to ward off the enemy. Meanwhile, Chi Mozi sprang up into the air and flew toward the fire attribute Tao warriors, then summoned his time-severing torch, seemingly intending to immobilize the Tao warriors with his time law powers. However, he quickly discovered that his time law powers had no effect on these Tao warriors. Xingshan had been carefully trailing along behind Chi Mozi this entire time, and he was instantly rooted to the spot by the time-severing torch. Chi Mozi cast his gaze toward the golden lamp on the altar, and a look of realization instantly appeared on his face. These Tao warriors were able to draw upon the power of the altar, so they were naturally also able to borrow the power of the lamp to help them ward off the effects of time law powers. With that in mind, Chi Mozi withdrew his time-severing torch, then flipped a hand over to produce his black stone axe, which he swung through the air at the 100 or so oncoming fire attribute Tao warriors. A streak of crescent-shaped black light erupted out of the blade of the axe before sweeping toward the fire attribute Tao warriors, which immediately stopped in their tracks before quickly switching to a different formation. The crimson flames burning over their suits of armor connected together to form a wall of fire, and at the same time, the Tao warriors at the forefront of the formation swung their sabers through the air in unison. A resounding boom rang out as a massive wall of fire surged forth, sweeping toward Chi Mozi with burning fury. The wall of fire burned holes into the surrounding air to form spatial vortexes, and immediately thereafter, the second row of Tao warriors swung their sabers through the air as well, forming a second wall of fire, then a third, then a fourth. By the time the black axe projection struck the first wall of fire, over 10 spatial vortexes had already appeared in the surrounding area. The first wall of fire was eradicated by the black axe projection, while the latter continued onward, slicing through the second and third walls of fire as well. The destroyed walls of fire exploded into countless flames that were immediately devoured by the spatial vortexes in the air. Meanwhile, the black axe in Chi Mozi's hand had already transformed into a black whirlwind that encompassed his entire body, and he flew straight through several walls of fire to force his way into ranks of the fire attribute Tao warriors. Meanwhile, the 5 devilish beings were opposing the wood attribute Tao warriors, and all of them turned to the Eagle Nose King for a plan of attack. Just adopt a defensive formation for now. There's no need to strike too early when we can just wait for the others to test out the waters for others, the Eagle Nose King said as he crossed his arms, and it seemed like he had no intention of doing any of the dirty work himself. The other four devilish beings seemed to have already grown accustomed to this, and a wide grin appeared on the White Bone King's face as he said, "It's been a long time since we've gotten any good exercise, so let's start off with the four symbols formation for now." Sounds like a good warm-up. The other three devilish beings eagerly agreed, and they rushed forward while plumes of black smoke began to rise up from their bodies. Enshrouded within the black smoke, the four devilish beings adopted their true devilish forms, with the Copper Lion King at the front, the White Bone King bringing up the rear, and the other two on the sides. It was clear that they were very familiar with fighting alongside one another, and they resembled a single, unified entity. The oncoming wood attribute Tao warriors displayed no fear as they plunged their weapons into the ground, which immediately began to rumble and tremble violently. The Eagle Nose King's brows furrowed slightly as he looked down to discover a layer of slick moss rapidly spreading over the ground toward him, while thick vines erupted out of the earth. The ground below crumbled with a thunderous commotion, and countless vines sprang out of the ground like devilish tentacles before piercing into the four symbols formation. "You know what? I may get involved after all," the Eagle Nose King murmured to himself, following which a layer of black devilish flames emerged over his body, and he sprang up into the air like a majestic bird of prey before also swooping into the formation. Meanwhile, Han Li and the others were facing off against the remaining Tao warriors. Lan Yuanzi and Lan Yan seemed to have connected their immortal spiritual power through the use of some type of secret technique, and they were locked in battle against the water attribute Tao warriors. The two of them swept their sleeves through the air to release torrents of water that kept the oncoming Tao warriors at bay, and the water was also releasing plumes of white smoke that gave off a mesmerizing aroma. At the same time, Lei Yus, Wen Zhang, and Su Anqian were battling the earth attribute stone golems. These stone golems didn't possess any strange abilities, but they were extremely strong and resilient. Every time they were struck down, they were always able to fully regenerate in a matter of seconds, and it was as if they possessed undying bodies. As for Han Li, he had joined forces with Worm 3 and Fox 3 against the golden, spear-wielding Tao warriors. Their suits of armor were no less resilient than the bodies of the stone golems, and with each thrust of their spears, arrows of golden light would erupt out of the corkscrew-shaped tips. These arrows of golden light were extremely sharp, and even though Han Li was maintaining a distance of over 100 feet from the Tao warriors, the arrows of light were still able to reach him in an instant. What was even more problematic was that even though these Tao warriors didn't seem to possess any intelligence, they were working together extremely seamlessly like a disciplined and well-trained army, and there were no holes in their defense for Han Li's trio to exploit. Right at this moment, Han Li suddenly yelled, "Look out!" Fox 3 immediately twisted to the side upon hearing this, and he was only just barely able to evade two arrows of golden light that had suddenly shot down at him from above. Even though he was able to evade the attack, a gash was still sliced into his shoulder, and blood began to flow from the wound. He took a glance at the gash, and it wasn't severe, so he threw himself back into the battle. However, shortly thereafter, he discovered that not only had the gash not healed, his entire arm had become incredibly heavy, as if it had been injected with lead. He hurriedly called out for Han Li and Worm 3 to cover him, while he took several pills before closing his eyes to meditate. However, to his astonishment, he discovered that the pills had no effect on the wound at all. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he flipped a hand over to produce a yellow gourd, which he turned upside down to conjure up a yellow vortex. A series of yellow beans flew out of the vortex, before transforming into an army of lightning-armored Tao warriors to oppose the golden Tao warriors. Han Li's Tao warriors were of a far inferior caliber, so they were no match for their opponents, but they excelled in numbers, and they were able to assist Worm 3 in holding off all of the enemy Dao warriors for now. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Han Li immediately flew over to Fox 3's side, and the latter looked up at him with tightly furrowed brows as he said, "Make sure you don't get struck by those arrows of golden light, fellow Taoist Han. This tiny gash refuses to stop bleeding, and it's made my arm so heavy that I can barely lift it. On top of that, even taking pills hasn't had any effect." A contemplative look appeared in Han Li's eyes upon hearing this, following which a burst of golden light emerged over the palm of his hand as he gently brushed it over the wound. A small tree projection appeared over the wound amid a flash of golden light, and it was none other than the Eastern Vicissitudes divine tree. As soon as the tree emerged, its roots burrowed deep into Fox 3's wound before releasing waves of golden ripples, and Fox 3 immediately felt a burst of heat flow through his entire arm. To his surprise, his arm didn't feel as heavy as before, and the bleeding had also ceased. "I've only used my time law powers to temporarily seal your wound so that it won't affect your mobility, so you're going to have to find some other way to expel that burst of power from your body later," Han Li said. "That's fine. You have my thanks, fellow Taoist Han," Fox 3 replied with a nod. Han Li turned and cast his gaze toward the five-colored altar beyond the Tao warriors as a contemplative look appeared on his face. "What is it, fellow Taoist Han?" Fox 3 asked. Instead of answering his questions, Han Li turned to Worm 3 as he called out, "Fellow Taoist Worm 3, these Tao warriors are able to draw power from the altar, and we won't be able to eradicate them unless we can cut them off from their power source. Do you have any ideas, fellow Taoist Han?" Worm 3 asked as she also disengaged herself from the battle. "I want to try and use my spirit domain to cut off this connection, but my spirit domain alone most likely doesn't possess the power required to accomplish this, so I'm going to require your assistance," Han Li said. "So all you need me to do is release my spirit domain?" Worm 3 asked. "That's right. Just release your spirit domain to encompass a small area and focus only on the metal attribute Tao warriors. Once we've eradicated them, we'll be able to wipe out the rest," Han Li replied. "All right, in that case, let's begin," Worm 3 said. "There's no hurry. I'll inform the others of my plan first," Han Li replied, then informed Lei Yus and the others of his proposed course of action so that they could prepare themselves accordingly. Once everyone had been alerted to what was going to happen, Han Li gave Worm 3 a nod, following which his time spirit domain abruptly shrank drastically in size, while a dark red spirit domain emerged at almost the exact same moment. The two spirit domains overlapped virtually perfectly with one another, only encompassing the metal attribute Tao warriors within it. As a result, Lei Yus and the others were left exposed outside the time spirit domain, and they hurriedly channeled their immortal spiritual power with all their might to ward off the effects of the Aeon Divine Lamp's time law powers. Meanwhile, a peculiar aura began to emanate from Han Li and Worm 3's spirit domains, and the two spirit domains began to glow far brighter than before. The golden spears wielded by the metal attribute Tao warriors trapped within the two spirit domains immediately began to dim, and the arrows of golden light that they released faded away altogether. "It's working. Don't let them get away," Han Li yelled in an elated manner, and the three of them immediately sprang into action, quickly eradicating all of the metal attribute Tao warriors with the assistance of Han Li's lightning-armored Tao warriors. Immediately thereafter, a resounding boom rang out elsewhere in the palace, and a burst of flames rose up into the air. It seemed that the Tao warriors over there had been eradicated by Chi Mozi as well. With two groups of Tao warriors destroyed, the five-elemental formation was instantly rendered incomplete, and it was only a matter of time before the rest of the Tao warriors were going to be wiped out. Han Li hurriedly stowed away what remained of his Tao warriors upon seeing this, then began to rush toward the altar. However, right at this moment, a burst of black and white light abruptly rose up from the ground, then transformed into a black and white figure that sprang over everyone, flying directly toward the altar. It was a young woman dressed in a black and white robe. The woman was completely expressionless, and there was a layer of faint black and white light over her body. To Han Li's surprise, even though he was able to see the woman, his spiritual sense wasn't able to detect any aura from her at all, as if she were nothing more than an illusion, and judging from everyone else's stunned reactions, it was clear that the same applied to them as well. A puppet imbued with yin-yang law powers. That's certainly a rare sight. Which one of you does this puppet belong to? Chi Mozi asked with a cold sneer as he swept his gaze over everyone present. Puzzled looks appeared on everyone's faces upon hearing this, and even though they had no idea who the puppet belonged to, they immediately launched themselves at the altar as well. The yin-yang puppet thrust a palm forward through the air, releasing a burst of black and white light that formed a circular, yin-yang shield that was around 3 feet in radius. The black and white halves of the yin-yang shield were revolving incessantly, and it was able to ward off the restrictive power in the air to reach the altar without any resistance. As opposed to the golden scroll, the black, triangular tablet, or the golden lamp, the puppet was reaching for the bonded soul tablets of Klin's trio. An urgent look appeared on Fox 3's face upon seeing this, and he summoned his heavenly fox bloodform saber before slashing it at the puppet from behind. A streak of crescent-shaped crimson light immediately swept through the air toward the puppet, and in response, the puppet made a strange hand seal with its other hand, upon which a giant yin-yang symbol was conjured up behind it. The streak of crimson light struck the yin-yang symbol, and the latter shuddered violently, following which piercing, crimson light exploded in all directions, slicing through the surrounding space. However, in the next instant, the yin-yang symbol began to revolve rapidly while releasing a burst of peculiar energy fluctuations, and all of the crimson light was sucked into it in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the puppet was already reaching down to grab the 3 crimson tablets beneath the golden lamp. However, right at this moment, the lamp suddenly shuddered violently as it began to glow with dazzling, golden light, and the flame at its center reared to release waves of golden fire that proliferated through the air in all directions. The puppet was closest to the lamp, so it was naturally struck first, and it only just barely had time to conjure up another yin-yang symbol in front of itself before the wave of fire crashed into its body, sending it flying over everyone's heads before tumbling to the ground, where it instantly vanished into the earth. Lei Yus and the others hurriedly rushed back in retreat in the face of the oncoming waves of fire, but they had been caught off guard. Lan Yuanzi hurriedly pulled Lan Yan behind himself, then swept a sleeve through the air to summon the blue pouch, which released a wave of blue water that formed a barrier of water in front of them. The flames clashed against the barrier of water, resulting in an explosion of blue water lightning. Lan Yuanzi and Lan Yan retreated as quickly as they could before tumbling to the ground. The latter was completely unscathed, but the former couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood. "Are you all right?" Lan Yan hurriedly asked as she grabbed onto his arm to support him, and Lan Yuanzi assured her that he was fine before stowing the blue pouch away again. Compared with them, everyone had been dealt even heavier blows, and they were all reeling from the impact. Even the 5 devilish beings had been forced back in retreat, despite their formidable physical constitutions. Xingshan was aware that he was the weakest out of everyone present, so he didn't even dare to approach the altar in the first place, and he had been spared of harm for his foresight. In contrast with everyone else, Han Li and Chi Mozi were forcing their way through the waves of fire as they continued to rush toward the altar. Han Li was surrounded by manifestations of his 5 time attribute law treasures, which kept the fiery waves at bay as he forged ahead, while Chi Mozi only had his time-severing torch hovering before him, but it was giving off even more formidable time law power fluctuations than Han Li's law treasure manifestations. On top of that, his cultivation base also far surpassed Han Li's, so he was able to reach the altar first. "The Aeon Divine lamp is mine," he chortled with glee as he reached for the lamp, grabbing onto it before attempting to pull it off the altar, but it remained completely still, as if it had taken root there. Chimozi's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he released his great encompassment stage in its entirety as he pulled on the lamp with all his might. The Aeon Divine lamp finally tilted slightly, and a drop of golden lamp oil splashed out from inside before being ignited by the lamp's flame. An alarmed look appeared on Chi Mozi's face upon seeing this, and his time-severing torch instantly vanished into his body at his behest. At the same time, a layer of golden flames emerged over the length of his entire arm. As soon as the spark spilled down onto the ground, it immediately reared up as a wave of golden fire that surged toward Chi Mozi's flame-enveloped arm. The fire on Chi Mozi's arm was only able to resist for a moment before all of it retreated into his body, leaving his arm to be swallowed up by the wave of golden fire, and it was reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Han Li had also arrived on the altar, and he reached out for the other items on the altar outside of the lamp. An alarmed look appeared on Chi Mozi's face as his incinerated arm detached itself from his body at his shoulder on its own, while he also reached out his other hand for the other items on the altar. Han Li was able to capture the golden scroll and 2 of the crimson tablets, while the triangular, black tablet and the final crimson tablet fell into Chi Mozi's grasp. Neither of them were willing to settle for this outcome, but it was too dangerous to stay on the altar, so instead of engaging each other in battle, both of them immediately darted back in retreat. Right at this moment, countless flashing specks of golden light appeared on the walls of the palace. These specks of light then joined up to form a thick, golden light barrier that encompassed the entire palace, including even the ground and the ceiling. The light barrier was so dense that it was almost opaque, and it appeared nigh indestructible. The spatial fluctuations in the palace became more and more condensed, and it was completely isolated from the outside world, becoming a completely independent space. At the same time, the flame in the Aeon Divine lamp on the altar began to glow far brighter than before, and the time law power fluctuations that it was giving off had also become far more formidable. Immediately thereafter, 9 fiery dragons erupted out of the lamp before pouncing at Han Li and Chi Mozi. Having already learned the power of the lamp's fire the hard way, Chi Mozi immediately shot back in retreat, not daring to oppose the fiery dragons. Han Li was retreating even faster than him, covering a distance of several thousand feet in a flash before landing on the ground far away from the altar. As soon as they landed on the ground, they were immediately swarmed by the nearby Tao warriors. Even though the Tao warriors' 5-elemental formation had been broken, there were still quite a few of them left, but they were far less powerful than before. Han Li made a hand seal, and countless streaks of peerlessly sharp golden sword chi erupted out of his body in all directions. A string of dull thuds rang out as the nearby Tao warriors were sent flying back through the air to create a large, open area around Han Li. But more Tao warriors continued to charge at him without any fear for their own safety. Right at this moment, Worm 3's voice rang out. "Come over here, fellow Taoist Han." Han Li turned to discover Worm 3 and Fox 3 standing with their backs against one of the palace's walls, using their immortal treasures to force back all of the Tao warriors within a radius of several dozen feet. Han Li immediately flew over to the two of them as a streak of golden light, and Fox 3 turned to him with an intrigued expression as he said, "Impressive as always, fellow Taoist Han. Which two bonded soul tablets did you manage to acquire?" Han Li cast his gaze toward the pair of crimson tablets in his hand upon seeing this. In his haste to retreat from the altar, he hadn't yet inspected the tablets. Each tablet had a tiny image etched onto it, depicting a golden beetle and a white horse. Fox 3's expression instantly darkened slightly upon seeing this, and he turned his gaze to Chi Mozi. Worm 3 didn't seem to be interested in the three items that Han Li had claimed from the altar, and she also turned her gaze to Chi Mozi, who had already retreated back to join the five devilish beings. His incinerated arm was still burning, and the golden flame was rapidly making its way toward his shoulder, incinerating all of the flesh and bone along the way. "Chief Warden, your arm," Kshengshan exclaimed. "Calm down, it's just a minor injury," Chi Mozi harumphed, then opened his mouth to release a small, golden sword. The golden sword sliced through his shoulder, severing a small chunk of flesh, following which the wound was immediately shrouded in a layer of golden light to prevent bleeding. As soon as the chunk of flesh left his body, it immediately erupted into flames and was burned into ashes. Chi Mozi then promptly devoured a green pill, and he was able to quickly regrow a new arm that was identical to the previous one. Han Li turned his gaze away from Chi Mozi to assess the battlefield, and in doing so, he discovered that the Lan siblings were locked in battle against some Dao warriors nearby, but Lei Yus, Wen Zhang, and Su Anqian were nowhere to be seen. Han Li was just about to release his spiritual sense to search for the trio when they appeared directly above the altar amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, and they were joined by an elderly man dressed in a Taoist robe. The man was holding a palm-sized golden talisman, upon which was etched the image of a golden lamp that was identical to the Ian divine lamp. The golden talisman was giving off radiant, golden light that contained formidable time law power fluctuations identical to the ones being given off by the Ian divine lamp, and the talisman flew through the air as a streak of golden light at the elderly man's behest, vanishing into the Ian divine lamp in a flash. The flame in the lamp instantly shrank down to its original size, while everyone else in the palace looked on with stunned expressions. "That's Taoist Master Dao Yin, the master of the Almighty Sword Sect," Worm 3 exclaimed. The five devilish beings shuddered slightly in fear upon hearing this, while Lan Yuanzi and Lan Yan also distanced themselves further from Taoist Master Dao Yin, with fearful looks on their faces. Han Li's brows also furrowed slightly upon hearing this. After arriving in the Golden Origin Immortal region, he had naturally taken it upon himself to learn about this immortal region, and he had certainly looked into a major sect like the Almighty Sword Sect. Taoist Master Dao Yin of the Almighty Sword Sect was extremely renowned in the Golden Origin Immortal region, and it was no exaggeration to say that his reputation exceeded even that of Dongfang Bai. Not only was he a great encompassment cultivator, he had an extremely fiery and unyielding personality, and he was renowned for his bitter resentment of all forces of evil. It was said that he had been in seclusion for a very long time, attempting to sever his first corpse soul, and it was unclear whether he had succeeded in this endeavor. How did Taoist Master Dao Yin manage to get in here? The entrance of the palace was already closed, and even a great encompassment cultivator wouldn't have been able to sneak in easily. Could it be that this had something to do with that yin-yang puppet from earlier? Before long, the answer was revealed by Lei Yus, who chanted an incantation before sweeping a sleeve through the air to conjure up a spatial door. Han Li was very familiar with spatial doors like this, as it was the entrance to a spatial treasure. Three figures, two men and a woman, flew out of the spatial door to join Lei Yu's group at the top of the altar, and judging from the attire, it was clear that they were all cultivators of the almighty sword sect. The two men consisted of a yellow-skinned elderly man and a red-haired young man, while the woman was quite youthful in appearance and had a pea-sized green gemstone embedded into her glabella, giving her a sense of exotic allure. The three of them were all mid-high zenith cultivators. "What is the meaning of this, fellow Taoist Lei?" Worm 3 asked in a grim voice. Lei Yus remained silent, while Taoist Master Dao Yin swept a resentful gaze over everyone in the palace as he said in a cold voice, "All of you scoundrels have been recklessly taking treasures from this place with no regard for the consequences. This is where you die for your transgressions." As soon as his voice trailed off, he swept a sleeve through the air to summon a jade plate roughly the size that was roughly a foot in diameter. The plate was split up into 5 sections, each of which was a different color, namely golden, green, blue, red, and yellow. And there were many runes engraved onto each section, giving it the appearance of a profound treasure. Everyone collectively backed away a few steps, with wary looks on their faces upon seeing this. In contrast with everyone else, a look of bewilderment appeared on Chi Mosey's face at the sight of the 5-colored plate, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a virtually identical 5-colored plate of his own. A derisive sneer appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face upon seeing this, and he made a hand seal while chanting a complex incantation. The 5-colored plate before him instantly began to radiate golden, green, blue, red, and yellow light in an alternating fashion, while Chi Mosey was also attempting to activate his own 5-colored plate, but to his surprise, it displayed no reaction. All of a sudden, the ground near the altar began to rumble violently as 5 massive jade pillars that were over 1,000 feet tall and around 40 to 50 feet in diameter rose up from the ground. Lei Yus and Su Anqian flew onto the golden and blue pillars, respectively, before sitting down with their legs crossed, while the 3 Almighty Sword sect cultivators that had just appeared flew onto the remaining 3 pillars, leaving only Wen Zhang standing behind Taoist Master Dao Yin. His gaze fell upon the 5 people on the jade pillars, particularly lingering on Lei Yus for a brief moment, and in that moment, a hint of envy and dissatisfaction flashed through his eyes. After Lei Yus and the others had sat down, they each made a rapid string of hand seals, injecting dense streams of incantation seals into the jade pillars beneath them. The spirit patterns on the 5 pillars instantly lit up, forming 5 thick pillars of light that erupted into the heavens. A tremendous aura rose up from within the 5 pillars of light before sweeping through the air in all directions, causing the nearby space to ripple slightly. All of the Tao warriors in the palace were swept up like falling leaves in a fierce storm, crashing heavily into the walls of the palace. Han Li and the others were also forced to stumble back by the formidable storm, and only when their backs hit the walls behind them were they able to steady themselves. Chi Mosey was the only one who remained standing on the spot, and he continued to try and activate the 5-colored plate before him, but it remained unresponsive. "Give it up, you fool," Taoist Master Dao Yin sneered. "That 5-elemental plate for yours may have been able to control the formation from before, but it can't control the current 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation." A look of realization appeared on Chi Mosey's face upon hearing this, and his complexion paled slightly as he exclaimed, "You altered the structure of the formation while repairing the formation cores. So it seems like you're not a complete idiot. It was clear to us that the Heavenly Court was definitely going to send someone to infiltrate the newly opened Tai Sui Immortal Manor, so we prepared accordingly." Taoist Master Dao Yin gloated as he continued to make hand seals with more urgency, and the 5 pillars of light grew brighter and brighter while beginning to display signs of fusing together. Worm Three's expression changed drastically at the mention of the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation, and she hurriedly called out in a panic, "We can't let them activate the formation." The dark red light around her brightened significantly as she spoke, and she began flying toward the five pillars of light while resisting the fierce storm raging in the palace. Neither Han Li nor Fox 3 had heard of this formation before, but Worm 3's reaction told them that it was not to be taken lightly, and they immediately followed along behind her. A cold sneer appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face, and he didn't appear to be concerned in the slightest as he swept his golden talisman through the air. The flame in the Aeon divine lamp instantly reared up once again, and 9 fiery, golden dragons re-emerged, then swelled rapidly to several dozen times their original size before pouncing at Han Li's trio. Having already witnessed the power of these fiery dragons, Han Li's trio hurriedly attempted to take evasive measures, but right at this moment, a sly grin appeared on Worm 3's face as she swept her right hand through the air, releasing a large, yellow seal. The seal passed through a gap in between the 9 fiery dragons, appearing before the 5 jade pillars in the blink of an eye. Worm 3 chanted a rapid incantation while pointing a finger at the seal, and a resounding thump rang out as the seal released a burst of astonishing spiritual pressure, coupled with blinding, yellow light that contained layers upon layers of profound and complex yellow runes. These runes vanished into the seal in a flash, causing it to swell rapidly to the size of a small mountain, taking up close to half of the space in the palace as it crashed toward the 5 jade pillars with unstoppable might. Compared with the enormous yellow seal, the 5 jade pillars were made to appear like mere chopsticks. "I'm afraid this is not the right place to be using the vast earth seal," Taoist Master Dao Yin remarked in an indifferent manner as he pointed a finger at the yellow jade pillar, and a burst of yellow light instantly split off from it to strike the yellow seal. As soon as the seal came into contact with this streak of yellow light, it quickly shrank down to its original size, then flew into the pillar of yellow light, where it revolved incessantly above the yellow-faced elderly man's head. A stunned look appeared on Worm 3's face upon seeing this. "Those 5 immortal treasures that you took are all a part of the formation to begin with. Otherwise, why do you think we allowed you to claim these treasures so easily? It's time for you to cough those treasures back up now." Taoist Master Dao Yin sneered as he laid a palm down onto the 5-colored jade plate, which immediately lit up, as did the 5 pillars of light. All of a sudden, the primordial ancient sword in Xingshan's hand began to glow radiantly, before flying out of his grasp toward the pillar of yellow light in the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation, and it refused to return to him despite his frantic efforts to recover it. The blue pouch in Lan Yan's hand also lit up before flying out of her grasp toward the pillar of blue light, while a green cane that was over 2 feet in length flew out of Lan Yuanzi's storage treasure without any warning before flying toward the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation as well. At the same time, the white bead emerged beside Han Li amid a burst of spatial fluctuations before flying through the air, and he immediately reached out to make a grab for it. A giant, golden hand appeared above the bead before closing itself around it, but the white bead released several pillars of fire that tore through the giant hand before eradicating it with ease. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, and the white bead flew into the pillar of red light in a flash, while the other 3 immortal treasures also flew into the golden, blue, and green pillars of light, where they circled around in the air above Lei Yus and the others. Bolstered by these 5 immortal treasures, the 5 pillars of light lit up even further while giving off astonishing law power fluctuations. Meanwhile, Taoist Master Dao Yin set down the golden talisman in his hand, then opened his mouth to release several globules of blood essence that fused into the 5-colored plate before him. At the same time, He cast a rapid string of incantation seals into the plate, and Lei Yus and the others followed his lead, opening their mouths to release their blood essence into the immortal treasures above their heads. The five-colored light emanating from the five-colored plate flashed erratically for a moment before abruptly fading away, while the five pillars of light intertwined with one another to form a spherical, five-colored light barrier that encompassed the altar alongside Su Ankian and all of the Almighty Sword Sect cultivators. This sequence of events had unfolded in the span of mere seconds, and Han Li and others were powerless to stop it. Meanwhile, a drastic change was also taking place outside the Ian Palace. A resounding boom rang out from each of the five formation cores on the giant mountain, and they each released a thick pillar of light that was countless times thicker than the pillars of light in the Ian Palace. The clouds up above instantly began to churn violently, while the entire seventh level also began to tremble and quake. All of the world's origin chi in the entire level surged into the five gargantuan pillars of light, and a vast, five-colored, spherical light barrier began to slowly emerge around the five pillars of light, encompassing the entirety of the enormous mountain down below. A burst of unfathomable power began emanating from the five-colored light barrier, and even a slight ripple in this power was enough to shatter the nearby space. At this point, all of the unrest taking place in the Ian Palace had already ceased, and all of the spiritual chi inside had fused into the five-colored light barrier. A series of five-colored spirit patterns appeared on the light barrier, giving off a gentle, five-colored glow that appeared to be completely innocuous. However, Han Li was struck by an intense sense of foreboding at the sight of the five-colored light barrier. All of a sudden, the almighty sword diagram in his storage tool began to glow radiantly, as if it were competing against the five-colored light barrier. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, but given the urgency of the situation, there were more pressing concerns for him to worry about. Fellow Taoist Worm 3, you seem to be quite familiar with this five-elemental Great Annihilation formation. What kind of formation is it? He asked through voice transmission, so that his voice was audible only to Worm 3 and Fox 3. The five-elemental Great Annihilation formation is one of the 10 supreme ancient formations, but it's been lost for countless years, so very few people know of it. This formation doesn't appear to be complete, and it's only just barely able to function thanks to the five immortal treasures. But even so, the formation is most likely going to be far too powerful for us to resist, Worm 3 replied with a grim expression. What do we do then? Fox 3 asked in an urgent manner. At this point, all we can do is hold on and hope for the best, Worm 3 replied with a heavy heart. The color slowly drained from Fox 3's face upon hearing this, and a grim look had also appeared on Han Li's face, but he was able to stave off the grips of despair as he swept his gaze over the surrounding palace. Taoist Master Dao Yin clearly intended to kill everyone in one fell swoop, but there was no way that Chi Mozi and the five devilish beings would simply roll over and allow themselves to be slain. If all of them could join forces, then they would stand a much better chance at survival. But Taoist Master Dao Yin had clearly already assessed the situation and determined that there was no way that everyone present could work together. Fellow Taoist Chi Mozi, didn't you tell us that you can capture the Ian Divine Lamp and control the formation in this place? What's going on here? The White Bone King asked in a cold voice through voice transmission, while the other devilish beings also turned to him with accusatory looks in their eyes. Chi Mozi had told them that he could control everything in the Ian Palace, and that once they arrived in this place, they would be able to easily kill Han Li and the others, after which Chi Mozi would split half of their treasures with the five devilish beings. The five devilish beings had accompanied Chi Mozi here as they were extremely confident in their own powers, but things hadn't gone according to plan at all. Chi Mozi remained silent with a dark look on his face. Meanwhile, Lan Yuanzi and Lan Yan had backed away even further from the altar, arriving near the entrance of the palace, but they chose not to approach Han Li's trio or Qi Mozi's group, clearly not trusting any of them. At this point, Taoist Master Dao Yin had already stopped what he was doing. His complexion was rather pale, indicating that he had exerted himself quite severely in activating the formation, but there was a fervent look of excitement in his eyes, and he turned to Han Li and the others with a derisive sneer as he swept a sleeve through the air. The five-colored light barrier around him immediately lit up, following which countless head-sized balls of light flew out from within before hurtling toward everyone in the palace. These balls of light were flashing with five-colored radiance, and each type of light was giving off law powers corresponding with one of the five elements. The five types of law powers were conflicting violently with one another, but they didn't completely erupt. Even so, the destructive aura being released by the conflicting law powers still struck fear deep into everyone's hearts, and they hurriedly adopted measures to defend themselves. The five devilish beings revealed their true, devilish forms while unleashing their spirit domains in unison, and the five spirit domains intertwined with one another to form an ovular black formation with five giant, black beastly projections inside, serving as the domain spirits. The five domain spirits were extremely formidable, blasting arcs of black lightning and torrents of black, devilish flames out of their mouths, to significantly bolster the five spirit domains. This combination of their spirit domains was one of their most powerful trump cards, and in addition to that, the five devilish beings had opened their mouths to release a vast formation of close to 100 devilish treasures, all of which were giving off incredibly formidable devilish qi fluctuations. The five spirit domains didn't encompass Qi Mozi and Xing Shan, perhaps because the five devilish beings were resentful of Qi Mozi for his inability to follow through on his promises. A cold sneer appeared on Qi Mozi's face upon seeing this, and he didn't appear concerned in the slightest. A burst of golden light erupted out of his body, forming a golden spirit domain that was over 100 feet in size to encompass both himself and Xing Shan. The spirit domain was extremely dense, making it impossible to see what was happening inside from the outside. The water law powers cultivated by the land siblings excelled in defense, so they had been quite confident in their ability to ward off the attacks of the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation on their own, and that was why they had chosen to act on their own. However, their expressions instantly changed slightly upon sensing the power of these five-colored balls of light, and they hurriedly released their spirit domains before combining them together. Plumes of blue law threads flew out of their bodies before intertwining with one another to form a blue vortex around them, and two domain spirits appeared beside the vortex, both of which had humanoid upper bodies paired with serpentine, with each of them wielding a blue trident. The two domain spirits rapidly revolved around Lan Yuanzi and Lan Yan, while swinging their tridents through the air to release countless arcs of blue water lightning. Meanwhile, Han Li's trio had also set up some defenses. Fox 3 was the first one to spring into action, releasing his spirit domain while also summoning his heavenly fox bloodform saber. He opened his mouth to release a ball of blood essence into the saber, and it immediately began to glow with incandescent crimson light, while swelling drastically to several 100 feet in size. At the same time, he made an urgent string of hand seals, and the giant crimson saber transformed into a light barrier around the trio. Meanwhile, Worm 3 had also unfurled her spirit domain, and 4 streaks of dark red light flew out of her body before landing around the spirit domain, where they revealed themselves to be 4 dark red archways. The archways had the characters for north, south, east, and west inscribed upon them, and they were releasing countless rays of dark red light that intertwined to form a protective light barrier. As for Han Li, he had also released his time spirit domain, and it encompassed an area that was only less than 200 feet in size, forming the innermost layer of defense. At the same time, the profound heavenly gourd appeared above his head, following which 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords flew out from within to form a defensive sword formation. Immediately thereafter, the barrage of 5 colored balls of light came crashing down, and they exploded violently as soon as they came into contact with the defenses that everyone had set up. The entire palace was instantly inundated by dazzling, 5-colored radiance, but the golden light barrier around the palace remained completely unmoved. The crimson saber barrier conjured up by Fox 3 was the first to be destroyed by the balls of 5-colored light, and it was barely able to pose any resistance. The destroyed light barrier reverted back into the heavenly fox bloodform saber, and it quickly returned to its original size before flying back into Fox 3's grasp with an anguished wail. The spirit domain around Fox 3 also exploded in the face of the oncoming barrage, and he shuddered violently as he stumbled back while throwing up a mouthful of blood. The barrage of 5-colored light then struck Worm 3's spirit domain, and she immediately released a flurry of dark red law threads, which split up into 6 batches that transformed into 6 rapidly revolving holes. The holes were pitch black and completely devoid of light, looking as if they led straight into the depths of hell. The balls of 5-colored light struck the dark red light barrier, causing it to tremble violently, and the outermost parts of the spirit domain immediately began to disintegrate. However, Worm 3's spirit domain was far more resilient than Fox 3's, and the 6 black holes were releasing tremendous suction force, devouring much of the destructive 5-colored light, while also nullifying the explosive 5-elemental law powers within them. However, there were simply too many of these balls of 5-colored light, and the 6 black holes were quickly overwhelmed, following which the entire spirit domain exploded violently. The wave of 5-colored light then struck the light barrier formed by the 4 archways, which began to flash erratically while giving off law power fluctuations that were far more formidable than those of Han Li's azure bamboo cloudswarm swords. The dark red light barrier was trembling violently, but it was able to keep the 5-colored light at bay. However, it was only able to do so for a few seconds before it also crumbled, causing Worm 3 to throw up a mouthful of blood as her aura diminished significantly. After overwhelming the dark red light barrier, the 5-colored light swarmed over the 4 archways, then continued onward without pause. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and over 200 time law threads flew out of his body before revolving through the air within his time spirit domain, significantly bolstering it in the process. At the same time, his mantra-treasured axis appeared behind him, then released countless waves of golden ripples that fused as one with his spirit domain. As soon as the wave of 5-colored light surged into his time spirit domain, it was instantly stopped cold in its tracks by the opposing time law powers. However, the 5-colored light was imbued with unfathomable power, and the time spirit domain and mantra-treasured axis quickly began to tremble violently, looking as if they could be overwhelmed at any moment. Han Li had encountered a similar scenario in the Almighty Sword formation, but this 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation was a far more powerful formation, and it had almost instantly overwhelmed his mantra-treasured axis. Despite this, Han Li remained unflustered as he quickly made a hand seal, and his 4 other time attribute law treasures emerged in unison, then began releasing radiant, golden light that infused itself into the time spirit domain. The wavering spirit domain was instantly stabilized, completely immobilizing all of the five-colored light that had surged into it. Immediately thereafter, the sword formation formed by the 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords sprang into action at his behest, and countless streaks of peerlessly sharp sword chi swept through the spirit domain, eradicating much of the five-colored light. At the same time, his profound heavenly gourd began to glow radiantly, and it released a burst of green light that swept toward what remained of the five-colored light in the time-spirit domain. All of the remaining five-colored light was instantly sucked into the profound heavenly gourd, and even though more and more five-colored light continued to surge into the time-spirit domain, it continued to be immobilized, eradicated, and devoured. Finally, the five-colored light in the palace faded away, revealing the aftermath of the barrage. Over at the entrance of the palace, Lan Yan's entire body was drenched in blood, and she was seated on the ground, missing her left hand, left foot, and close to half of her body. However, she paid no heed to her own injuries, as she stared blankly down at a blue jade flower in her right hand, with tears streaming down her cheeks. Lan Yuanzi was nowhere to be seen, and all that was left of him was a pair of destroyed immortal treasures. The combined spirit domains of the five devilish beings had also been destroyed, and on top of that, the Copper Lion King and the Blood Hand King had also disappeared, while the three remaining devilish beings were all carrying severe injuries and had looks of shock and horror on their faces. There was a ball of bright, golden light beside them, and it dissipated to reveal Qi Mozi and Xing Shan, both of whom were completely unscathed. Inside the five-colored light barrier, Taoist Master Dao Yin's complexion had paled even further, and the same applied to Lei Yus and the others as well. Han Li withdrew his time attribute law treasures, and Worm 3 and Fox 3 were a little unsteady on their feet, but they were very relieved to have survived the ordeal. Taoist Master Dao Yin was clearly rather surprised to see that so many people were still alive, and a hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes as he pointed a finger at the five-colored jade plate before him. A grim look appeared on Worm 3's face upon seeing this, and she turned to Han Li and Fox 3 as she communicated through voice transmission. "At this rate, all of us are going to die here. I have a way to turn the tables, but I'm going to need your help." Han Li immediately realized what Worm 3's intentions were, and he asked, "Are you suggesting that we free that devilish deity?" "We can't do that. There's a good chance that that devilish deity is a Tao ancestor, so we'll only be jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire," Fox 3 exclaimed. "We have no choice. Also, I'm at least 70% confident that I can keep him from attacking us," Worm 3 replied, and Han Li's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this. For some reason, he had a feeling that freeing the devilish deity here was the best course of action. In fact, he had been struck by this feeling from the instant that he arrived in this place, but he had suppressed it this entire time. Indeed, just as Worm 3 had said, they hardly had a choice in the matter. The five-elemental Great Annihilation formation was clearly far too powerful for them to resist, and if everyone else here were killed, he was far from confident in his own ability to oppose the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation and the almighty sword sect cultivators on his own. As for the consequences of releasing that devilish deity, that was something that he didn't want to think about. "What do you think, Brother Han?" Fox 3 asked as he turned to Han Li. "Releasing the Dark Heaven's devilish deity is going to be very risky, but if fellow Taoist Worm 3 has a way to keep him from attacking us, then I think it's a feasible solution," Han Li replied as an inexplicable sense of urgency welled up in his heart. Fox 3 was clearly quite surprised that Han Li had chosen to side with Worm 3, and he said, "I still think this isn't a sound plan. According to what Lei Yu said, the Dark Heaven's devilish deity is far more powerful than us. So what happens if we release him, only to be unable to control him? In my opinion, it would be best to break the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation, then try to resolve things peacefully with Taoist Master Tao Yin. You need to have more confidence in me, Worm 3 said as her brows furrowed slightly with displeasure. Having said that, seeing as you insist on exploring other options first, then let's try and deal with the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation for now. If the situation doesn't take a turn for the better, then we can resort to our backup plan of freeing the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. All right, Fox 3 acquiesced. Regardless of which course of action we choose to take, our top priority right now has to be to break through this light barrier, and that's not going to be an easy task to accomplish, Han Li interjected. You can rest assured on that front, fellow Taoist Han. I've already planted something in the vast Earth seal that allows me to disrupt the law powers within the seal for a duration of 5 seconds at will. Those 5 fourth-tier immortal treasures are the foundation of the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation. So if something goes wrong with the vast Earth seal, then the light barrier will definitely be left vulnerable, Worm 3 said with a sly gleam in her eyes. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, and only now did he realize that those were 5 fourth-tier immortal treasures. Given the tremendous power of the immortal treasures, he had thought that they would have been at the 3rd tier. With that in mind, he couldn't help but heave a forlorn internal sigh. He had been cultivating on his own for all these years, and even though his cultivation base had been progressing smoothly, he was severely lacking in experience when compared with someone like Worm 3, who had been nurtured by a major power. Worm 3 had noticed the change in Han Li's expression, and she asked, "Is there something wrong, fellow Taoist Han?" "Not at all," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "Time is of the essence, so let's begin." Worm 3 nodded in response, and the three of them quickly discussed the strategy that they were going to adopt. Shortly thereafter, the time-spirit domain around Han Li expanded rapidly to encompass the entire palace and everyone within it, following which Han Li's trio pounced at the altar from 3 different directions at once. The 5-colored jade plate in front of Taoist Master Tao Yin had only just lit up again when Han Li's trio launched themselves at the altar. The 3 of them were traveling at an astonishing speed and reaching the 5-colored light barrier in the blink of an eye. A cold sneer appeared on Taoist Master Tao Yin's face upon seeing this, and the 5-colored light barrier instantly began to glow radiantly at his behest. Even though he had been enshrouded in Han Li's time-spirit domain, his movements hadn't slowed down at all, and somehow, Han Li's time law powers were also proving to be completely ineffective on the 5-colored light barrier as well. Han Li was rather bewildered to see this, but before he had a chance to ponder the situation, another flurry of balls of 5-colored light erupted out of the light barrier. Perhaps it was because this was a rather rushed barrage from Taoist Master Tao Yin, but the number of balls of light was far fewer than that of the previous wave. Initially, these balls of light were as fast as ever, but after flying for some distance, they suddenly slowed down to a crawl. A perplexed look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, only to be replaced by a look of realization as his gaze fell upon the Aeon Divine Lamp beside Taoist Master Tao Yin. It seemed that everything within a certain range of the Aeon Divine Lamp was able to remain unaffected by his time-spirit domain. With that in mind, it occurred to him that the Aeon Divine Lamp was even more profound and powerful than he had anticipated, and he couldn't help but wonder how many time law threads he would be able to attain from refining it. Even at a conservative estimate, the number surely had to be in excess of 1,000. All of a sudden, an irrational urge to obtain the Aeon Divine Lamp at all costs welled up in his heart, and he was startled by the intensity of this urge. He hurriedly suppressed this impulsive thought, returning his attention to the crisis at hand. There was still some agitation in his heart, but he had no time to address that for now. In the face of the oncoming balls of five-colored light, he continued onward without pause, while sweeping a sleeve through the air to release the almighty sword formation diagram. Meanwhile, Worm 3 and Fox 3 immediately sprang back in retreat without any hesitation. They had only pounced forward as a bluff in the first place, so that Taoist Master Dao Yin's attention wouldn't be entirely focused on Han Li. And now that they had successfully attracted some of the five-elemental Great Annihilation Formation's firepower, they had accomplished their objective. Even though there were fewer balls of light than in the previous wave, this was still too ferocious a barrage for them to withstand. Taoist Master Dao Yin's expression changed drastically at the sight of the almighty sword formation diagram, and he frantically made a string of hand seals, upon which all of the balls of light shooting out of the five-colored light barrier veered away from Han Li in a desperate attempt to avoid striking the formation diagram. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief upon seeing this. Just as he had predicted, the formation diagram was of sufficient importance to the almighty sword sect that it could serve as an effective shield for him. Immediately thereafter, he abruptly accelerated to roughly twice his original speed, instantly flying through the storm of balls of light to arrive before the five-colored light barrier. He then stowed the formation diagram before thrusting his palms forward, and all of his time, law threads erupted out of his body, while the time-spirit domain around him also began to glow radiantly. A metallic clang rang out as a giant, golden sword that was around 100 feet in length and roughly 5 feet wide appeared in his hands. The sword was enshrouded in a layer of fiery, golden light that was as bright as the sun, and Han Li swung the sword down with all his might, aiming it at a section of the five-colored light barrier near the yellow jade pillar. A derisive sneer surfaced in Taoist Master Dao Yin's eyes upon seeing this, and he pointed a finger at the vast earth seal above the yellow jade pillar. The seal released a thick pillar of yellow light at his behest, and the yellow light surged into the section of the five-colored light barrier in front of Han Li, significantly bolstering it. All of a sudden, Worm 3 abruptly stopped in her retreat, then began making a rapid string of hand seals, and a layer of dark red light suddenly appeared over the surface of the vast earth seal, cutting off the pillar of yellow light that it was releasing. The yellow-faced elderly man seated on top of the yellow jade pillar was very much taken aback by this, and he hurriedly made a string of hand seals to try and free the vast earth seal from the restrictive layer of dark red light, but to no avail. At the same time, the section of the five-colored light barrier near the yellow jade pillar began to rapidly thin out, to the point that it had almost disappeared altogether. The balls of five-colored light hurtling through the air also disintegrated into specks of spiritual light, and before any of the almighty sword sect cultivators had a chance to do anything, Han Li's giant, golden sword had already struck the vulnerable area on the light barrier. A loud, tearing sound rang out as a rift that was dozens of feet in length was sliced into the light barrier, much to the elation of Worm 3. She began to chant an urgent incantation, and her spirit domain also erupted out of her body to encompass the entire palace. Immediately thereafter, she launched herself at the rift in the light barrier as a streak of dark red light. At the same time, Fox 3 summoned his heavenly fox bloodform saber, then transformed into a streak of gray light that adhered itself to the saber, which shot forth toward the rift in the light barrier at an even faster speed than Worm 3. The expressions of Qi Mozi, Xingshan, and the remaining three devilish beings changed slightly upon seeing this, and the Turtle-Back King turned to the Eagle-Nose King as he asked through voice transmission, "This is a great opportunity to destroy the five-elemental Great Annihilation Formation. Should we help them?" "There's no need for that. The ideal outcome would be for them to wipe out each other. None of the humans here are to be trusted. While those three are drawing all of the firepower to themselves, we should take this opportunity to find a way out of here, the Eagle-Nose King replied. A hesitant look appeared on the Turtleback King's face upon hearing this. He's right, this place is far too dangerous for us. We should have never believed Chi-Mozi's lies. We've already lost 2 brothers here. It would be foolish to stay any longer. The White Bone King urged in a grief-stricken manner. All right, in that case, let's see if we can find any weak points in the light barrier around this palace, the Turtleback King replied. Right as the 3 devilish beings were about to depart, a cold voice suddenly rang out beside them. You 3 are not going anywhere. Immediately thereafter, a golden spirit domain fell upon them, and Chi-Mozi was hovering in the air above them with a mocking sneer on his face. What's the meaning of this, Chi-Mozi? The Eagle-Nose King yelled as he struggled against the spirit domain with all his might, but to no avail. Chi-Mozi offered no response to the Eagle-Nose King aside from to erupt into laughter, and a vast expanse of golden light rose up within his spirit domain at his behest, then converged above the 3 devilish beings to form a projection of a golden man that was several hundred feet tall. The man had a draconic lower body and the upper body of a middle-aged man with a coarse beard and thick, golden chest hair. There was a fiery, golden fan held in the man's hand, and he was giving off an air of unmatched authority. The man reached out toward the 3 devilish beings with one hand, and a burst of tremendous pressure instantly crashed down upon them, completely immobilizing them and rendering them unable to utter even a single sound. I went out of my way to lure all of you here, and my intention was to claim all of you, but it looks like I'll have to make do with just the 3 of you, Chi-Mozi chuckled as he swept a sleeve through the air. And a crimson cane, with a 9-headed demonic dragon, engraved onto its head, flew out from behind him. 7 of the draconic heads were giving off bright, crimson light, while the other 2 were dull and completely devoid of luster. As soon as the cane appeared, fierce gusts of yin wind instantly rose up around it, and a burst of bone-chilling demonic power began to emanate from the cane, unrestricted even by the surrounding time spirit domain. Chi-Mozi chanted an incantation before pointing a finger at the cane, which released a burst of crimson light that encompassed the 3 devilish beings. Bursts of crimson light began to surge out of their bodies and into the cane, and their bodies quickly became dried and withered, while the 2 demonic dragon heads on the cane began to glow with radiant, crimson light. Ali. Meanwhile, Han Li had just flown through the rift in the 5-colored light barrier, and he hurled his giant, golden sword through the air, sending it flying toward the yellow jade pillar nearby. A furious look appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face as he pointed a finger at the golden talisman in his hand, and a thick beam of golden light instantly erupted out of the lamp image on the talisman. The image of the lamp instantly dimmed significantly, and the time law power fluctuations emanating from it had also become a lot weaker. The beam of golden light shot into the Aeon Divine lamp, and 2 bursts of golden flames instantly erupted out of it. One of them transformed into a fiery, golden dragon with a series of time Dao runes all over its body, and it appeared before the yellow jade pillar at an astonishing speed, before reaching out with its claws to grab at the giant, golden sword. As soon as the sword was caught in its grasp, the golden dragon wrapped its own body around the sword like lightning while blasting a jet of golden flames into the sword, causing it to rapidly melt at a rate that was discernible even to the naked eye. Meanwhile, the other burst of golden flames descended in front of the altar, where it transformed into a fiery, golden barrier. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, and he stopped in his tracks. Taoist Master Dao Yin heaved a faint sigh of relief, then turned his gaze to Han Li with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. Immediately thereafter, he swept a sleeve through to release a streak of dazzling, white light that shot forth at Han Li at an incredible speed. There wasn't much distance separating the two of them, so the streak of white light was able to reach Han Li as if by instantaneous teleportation. In response, Han Li conjured up his true extreme film while crossing his arms to form a defensive barrier in front of himself. At the same time, 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords flew out of his body to form a golden sword barrier. At the moment, he was in close proximity to the Aeon Divine Lamp, which had already displayed its capability of nullifying his time spirit domain, so he wasn't sure if his time attribute law treasures would be able to function here. Hence, he could only seek out alternative defensive measures. Before Han Li had a chance to do anything else, the streak of white light struck the golden sword barrier with a resounding boom, and the latter was instantly shattered, while the former continued onward without pause to strike Han Li's arms. Han Li was instantly sent flying back through the air, only to draw to a shuddering halt as his back struck the five-colored light barrier. A burst of intense pain shot up his arms, as if the bones inside had been fractured, and he hurriedly channeled his heavenly baleful purgatory arts to bolster his own physical constitution. To further compound his woes, the streak of white light came hurtling toward him once again, and it was glowing even brighter than before. Han Li hurriedly stepped to the side to dodge the attack while sweeping a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of green light that captured the streak of white light. The streak of white light was instantly slowed down drastically as a result, but in the next instant, it released countless needle-like bursts of white light in all directions, which tore the surrounding green light apart, following which it continued to hurtle toward Han Li. However, Han Li had already bought enough time for himself, and his 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords circled around through the air before hurtling toward the streak of white light as arcs of golden lightning. At the same time, he adopted his giant mountain ape form, transforming into a giant, golden ape in the blink of an eye. A string of loud, metallic clangs rang out as the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords struck the streak of white light in rapid succession, while the golden ape let loose a thunderous roar before swinging its massive fists down onto the streak of white light with tremendous power. The streak of white light was finally knocked back, but the golden ape was also sent stumbling back with its fists severely ravaged and bloodied. At this point, Han Li was able to identify the streak of white light as a small white sword, but it was several times thicker than the average flying sword, giving it a rather strange, dull appearance. However, it was giving off astonishing law power fluctuations that were inferior to those of the 5 immortal treasures in the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation, but not by much. A look of surprise and agitation appeared in Taoist Master Dao Yin's eyes, clearly caught off guard by the fact that Han Li had managed to withstand his attack with only such minor injuries to show for it. And he was just about to urge the white sword to spring into action again, when Worm 3 and Fox 3 flew through the rift in the 5-colored light barrier, before pouncing at the altar. Taoist Master Dao Yin hurriedly swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this, releasing a golden spirit domain that expanded rapidly toward Han Li's trio. The spirit domain was giving off metal law powers that were far more formidable than the law powers mastered by Han Li's trio, and even before encompassing them, it was already exerting immense pressure upon them. Fox 3 immediately stopped in his tracks, then flipped a hand over to summon his heavenly fox bloodform saber, and at the same time, a gray spirit domain erupted out of his body. He let loose a low roar as the gray spirit domain contracted rapidly to form a fist-sized ball of gray light, which vanished into the heavenly fox bloodform saber in a flash. One of the 4 eyes on the 2 fox heads etched onto the guard of the saber instantly began to glow with bright, crimson light, following which a burst of tremendous power erupted out of the saber, as if it had finally awakened after a long slumber. The entire saber began to glow radiantly, illuminating everything within the light barrier a crimson color, and Shikinghu emerged within the crimson light, making a rapid string of hand seals while countless crimson runes surged out of the saber. Fox 3 let loose a loud roar as he swung the saber through the air with both hands, unleashing an all-encompassing wave of crimson light that contained extremely formidable law power fluctuations, ones that weren't inferior in the slightest to those in Taoist Master Dao Yin's spirit domain. The wave of crimson light struck the golden spirit domain, and the projection of Shikinghu swelled to over 1,000 feet tall before pressing its hands down onto the golden spirit domain. The spirit domain's expansion was instantly stopped, unable to spread even an inch further. After unleashing that saber strike, Fox 3's complexion instantly turned deathly pale, and all of the immortal spiritual power had been drained from his body. He fell to one knee as his saber-wielding hand trembled uncontrollably, while Taoist Master Dao Yin looked on with a stunned expression. He hurriedly made a hand seal, and the dull, white sword swelled to several hundred feet in size at his behest, then began sweeping through the air toward Han Li's trio. Right at this moment, Han Li abruptly appeared before the giant, white sword, having already reverted back to his human form. All of a sudden, the huge, golden sword that had been ensnared by the fiery, golden dragon exploded violently at his behest, and the force of the explosion was enough to send the fiery dragon flying back through the air. Over 200 law threads shot out of the explosion, then vanished into thin air, only to reappear beside Han Li an instant later. Han Li began to chant an incantation while making a string of hand seals, and the law threads intertwined to reform a giant, golden sword to oppose the oncoming white sword. An earth-shattering boom rang out as the two giant swords clashed, and Han Li was able to keep the white sword at bay. But he was sent flying back through the air from the force of the impact, throwing up a mouthful of blood in the process. With his law powers severely suppressed by the Ian Divine Lamp, he was no match for a great encompassment cultivator. However, despite the fact that he had come out on top in that clash, Taoist Master Dao Yin was stunned to see that Han Li managed to survive that attack, and he was also astonished by the seemingly endless bag of tricks that Han Li was able to pull from. Worm 3 paid no heed to the clash taking place between Han Li and Taoist Master Dao Yin as she sped toward the five-colored altar. But at the moment, the altar was enshrouded within a fiery barrier released by the Ian Divine Lamp. She chanted an incantation as she raised her hands upward, and a series of dark red law threads flew out of her body, while the dark red light in the surrounding spirit domain rapidly converged toward her. As more and more law threads emerged, her complexion paled further and further, as if all of her strength were being slowly sapped away. However, there was a determined look of resolve in her eyes as she sped up even further in her chanting. The surrounding space rumbled violently, and the dark red law threads intertwined to form a red wheel projection the size of a house. There were 6 black holes dotted around the wheel, within each of which was a burst of black light that was revolving incessantly, forming a vortex that was giving off a burst of indescribable power, causing the nearby space to rumble violently. Worm 3 thrust her palms forward, and the dark red wheel instantly flew forward while revolving rapidly before crashing into the fiery, golden barrier. Jets of golden flames erupted out of the fiery barrier as it trembled violently, but those flames were all snuffed out by the layer of black light over the dark red wheel's surface upon contact. An agitated look appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face as he was forced to turn his attention to Worm 3, and he cast a string of incantation seals into the fiery, golden barrier to fortify it. In response, Worm 3 opened her mouth to release several balls of blood essence, following which her aura instantly became extremely feeble and diminished. The balls of blood essence fused into the dark red wheel as plumes of blood mist, and it instantly began to accelerate in its revolution, releasing a vast expanse of black light that swept toward the fiery barrier. Before long, the fiery barrier was overwhelmed by the black light released by the wheel, and it exploded into countless specks of golden fire. Only then did Taoist Master Dao Yin realize that Worm 3 was using the laws of reincarnation. Never had he imagined that these two high zenith cultivators had both mastered one of the three paramount laws, and their degree of mastery over their respective law powers wasn't inferior to that of the average great encompassment cultivator. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, and Lei Yus and the others were also expending a great deal of effort just to maintain the formation, so they were unable to assist Taoist Master Dao Yin at all. "Fellow Taoist Han, now's your chance," Worm 3 yelled. Her complexion was as pale as a sheet, and she had collapsed to one knee, as if all of the strength had been drained from her body. Meanwhile, Han Li had already darted through the eradicated barrier of fire as a streak of golden light, but he was rushing toward the Aeon Divine Lamp as opposed to the altar. "Fellow Taoist Han, what are you doing?" Worm 3 exclaimed in an alarmed manner. At this moment, there was a rather dazed look in Han Li's eyes, and it seemed that his attention was entirely fixated on the Aeon Divine Lamp, almost in an obsessive manner. Taoist Master Dao Yin was furious to see this, and he let loose a loud roar as he pointed a finger at the Aeon Divine Lamp from afar. Simultaneously, he bit through the tip of his own tongue before expelling a mouthful of blood essence. The Aeon Divine Lamp shuddered, and the lamp oil within it began to churn violently, raising a vast expanse of scorching, golden flames that swept toward Han Li. However, Han Li seemed to be completely oblivious to all of this. His desire had already completely overwhelmed his capacity for rational thought, and there was a deranged look on his face as he channeled his great 5-elemental illusion mantra with all his might. Manifestations of his 5 time attribute law treasures appeared around him, forming a spherical, golden light barrier around his body as he charged into the sea of fire. The manifestations of the 5 time attribute law treasures instantly began to converge toward him, compressed by the surrounding golden flames, and the golden light barrier was also gradually beginning to thin out. However, Han Li displayed no intention of backing down, as he continued to forge ahead with tightly gritted teeth. After just a few seconds, the 5 time attribute law treasures gave out, and the surrounding golden light barrier was eradicated, exposing Han Li's body directly to the flames. A burst of excruciating, scorching pain surged through his entire body, and an agonized look appeared on his face as a hint of lucidity surfaced in his eyes. But he then gave a cold harumph as a look of resolve reappeared on his face. He reached out through the flames to grab onto the Aeon Divine Lamp before pulling it toward himself. The flames on the lamp instantly converged to form a fiery dragon that climbed its way up his arm, instantly devouring his entire arm and close to half of his body. Han Li could clearly see the skin, flesh, and sinew of his arm slowly melting away to expose the bone underneath, which was gradually becoming charred black by the golden flames. However, deep within his soul, there was a voice that was constantly consoling and encouraging him. "Just persevere a little more and you'll have it. It'll all be worth it once you claim the lamp. You're almost there, don't give up. It's almost yours." In a desperate effort to claim the lamp, Han Li channeled his heavenly baleful purgatory arts and all of his true spirit bloodlines at once, completely uncaring of the fact that doing so could trigger severe bloodline backlash. At the moment, the Aeon Divine Lamp was the sole object of his fixation, and he was willing to risk everything to obtain it. A furious look appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face as he sped toward the lamp, leaving a trail of afterimages in his wake. Right as he did so, Worm 3 was somehow able to muster up the strength to strike, and the dark red wheel flew directly toward the five-colored altar at her behest. An alarmed look appeared on Taoist Master Dao Yin's face upon seeing this, but it was already too late to turn back. A burst of five-colored light surfaced over the altar in an attempt to ward off the red wheel, but it was completely futile, and a resounding boom rang out as a huge hole was smashed into the altar. Almost in the exact same instant, Han Li's spirit refinement technique began acting on its own, restoring a hint of clarity to his muddled mind. Right at this moment, a loud cry rang out beside his ears. "Fellow Taoist Han." Han Li turned with a dazed look in his eyes to discover Lei Yus roaring at him with all his might. "Are you really going to release that devilish deity and doom the entire golden origin immortal region just to satisfy your own selfish desires? The altar has already been broken. If the lamp is also taken, then that devilish deity will surely be freed." Han Li shuddered violently upon hearing this, and he suddenly realized the situation that he was in. He hurriedly released the Ian Divine lamp as he shot back in retreat, but the golden flames wrapped around his arm refused to let him go. In response, Han Li removed the profound heavenly gourd from his waist, then thrust his palm into its underside, and a green vortex instantly emerged from the mouth of the gourd to suck in the golden flames clinging to his arm. As soon as the flames surged into the gourd, its green exterior instantly turned a bright red color, as if it were being scorched from the inside. Han Li replaced the gourd back to his waist, then looked down at his own incinerated arm, and he couldn't help but shudder as a sheen of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. What happened to me? Have I fallen under someone's control? Han Li quickly retraced all of the events that had taken place since he set foot into the Ian Pagoda, and he was able to ascertain with a high degree of confidence that he hadn't fallen under anyone's control. However, the desire in his heart had been slowly mounting this entire time, but the process had been so subtle and gradual that he hadn't noticed it. Furthermore, it seemed like everyone who had entered the Ian Pagoda had fallen under the same influence, which slowly magnified their desires over time. That was why they had destroyed the altars to claim those treasures without any regard for the consequences. It seemed that anyone who had any desire to obtain the Ian Divine lamp would ultimately be led to it like moths to a flame. All of a sudden, Han Li's gaze fell upon the huge hole that had been blasted into the altar, where plumes of dense, black mist were rising up before flowing into the palace. A projection of the Eastern Vicissitudes divine tree appeared over Han Li's arm, and it began to quickly regenerate at a rate that was discernible even to the naked eye, but it wasn't going to be fully healed anytime soon. Han Li rose up into the air, then channeled his infernal devilish eyes as he peered into the hole in the altar. Deep within the altar was an enormous underground space that was filled with flowing, molten lava. The lava formed a dark red lake that was giving off plumes of scorching smoke, and hovering at the center of the lake was a huge, black rock with 8 black rock pillars standing upon it. All of the pillars were riddled with cracks that were flashing incessantly, as if there were molten lava flowing through them as well, and attached to each pillar was a golden chain, all of which led toward the center of the rock. Seated on the ground, there was an emaciated man with a head of disheveled hair. He was completely nude and so thin that it was as if he were literally just a sack of skin and bones, and the 8 golden chains were pierced through his chest, abdomen, shoulders, and arms, locking him firmly into place. On top of that, a series of ancient runes had been engraved onto the ground beneath him, giving off bursts of formidable restrictive power. Looking into the black hole, Han Li was struck by the feeling that he was peering into a bottomless abyss of desire. He shook his head to rid himself of these erratic thoughts, following which a perplexed look appeared on his face. For some reason, he felt like there was something strange about this formation, but he couldn't put his finger on exactly what was strange about it. Right at this moment, the man suddenly raised his head to meet Han Li's gaze, flashing him a wide smile that revealed 2 rows of gleaming, white teeth. Han Li hurriedly channeled his spirit refinement technique to protect his own consciousness, but it seemed that his concerns were unwarranted. Everyone had been startled by the deranged display that Han Li had put on earlier, and as a result, no one had noticed that a plume of black mist that seeped out from the edge of the hole in a stealthy fashion, then vanished after making its way over to Lei Yus and the others. At this moment, Taoist Master Dao Yin was glowering at the hole in the altar with a grim expression, and he murmured to himself, "This is going to be troublesome. At this point, it seems like I have no choice but to put an end to this once and for all." He heaved a faint sigh as he raised a hand to make a beckoning motion, drawing the vast earth seal into his grasp. He then sliced open his own finger to release a drop of blood essence, which instantly seeped into the seal. Immediately thereafter, he began chanting an urgent incantation, and the engravings on the underside of the seal flashed with yellow light while releasing bursts of incredibly formidable earth law powers. After refining the seal with his blood essence to forcibly eradicate the restriction that Worm 3 had planted within it, he began channeling the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation with all his might. The 5 immortal treasures rose up into the air, and they began to glow with an unprecedented level of brightness, while the law powers of Lei Yus and the others surged out of their bodies in a frenzy before being absorbed by the formation. At the same time, the 5-colored light barrier around the altar began to rapidly contract, and it didn't take long before it was only just barely large enough to encompass the altar. Immediately thereafter, the altar disintegrated into dust, as if it were a piece of artwork that had already endured countless millennia of decay. At the same time, the hole in the altar began to expand, and as soon as the black mist flowing out of it entered the area encompassed within the light barrier, it would also disintegrate into dust, just like the altar had. This is the true power of the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation. All that is encompassed within it is annihilated into dust, Chi Mozi murmured to himself. The 5-colored light barrier slowly descended into the hole in the altar, encompassing the black rock floating on the surface of the lava lake, as well as the stone pillars and the emaciated man on the rock. The black rock began to disintegrate, but the man's body remained intact, and there was a derisive sneer on his face. Han Li was staring intently at the man, and the latter seemed to have detected his gaze as he turned to Han Li before making a funny face, as if he were entertaining a child. Taoist Master Dao Yin's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and the divine lamp talisman before him suddenly erupted into flames. The talisman was quickly incinerated into ashes, leaving only a golden flame behind, and the flame fell upon the Aeon divine lamp to fuse as one with the flame already burning within the lamp. The Aeon divine lamp shuddered slightly, following which a burst of incredibly formidable energy fluctuations surged out from within it. An arc of golden lightning emerged from the flame in the lamp, then shot out of the lamp like a flying dagger before piercing into the 5-colored light barrier. A resounding boom rang out as an explosion of golden light took place within the 5-colored light barrier, completely obscuring the space within. A string of resounding booms rang out within the hole in the altar, and the stone pillars, the golden chains, and the emaciated man were all completely inundated by the blinding, golden light. A long while later, the commotion within the 5-colored light barrier subsided, and it was revealed that everything within it had been utterly annihilated, leaving a void of emptiness behind. The five-colored light barrier then disintegrated with a dull thump, while Taoist Master Tao Yin heaved a long sigh of relief. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. After sealing you here for so long, I've finally been able to kill you once and for all. Meanwhile, Lei Yus and the others slumped to the ground while gasping for air, looking completely drained, and they hurriedly took some pills to speed up their recovery. Almost all of the law powers and immortal spiritual power in their bodies had been exhausted, but thankfully, they had managed to slay the old devilish deity. Now then, it's time for all of you to suffer the same fate, Taoist Master Tao Yin said as he turned a cold gaze to Han Li and the others, all of whom immediately bristled in response. Taoist Master Tao Yin was a great encompassment cultivator, and he controlled the Aeon Divine Lamp. If he were to unleash another wave of balls of five-colored light, then the vast majority of the people left in the palace were undoubtedly going to be wiped out. Right as everyone was trying to think of a way out of this dire situation, a long blade suddenly pierced through Taoist Master Tao Yin's back before emerging from his lower abdomen, and blood immediately began to seep into his robe from the wound. His eyes widened in shock and fury as he swung around before lashing out at his assailant, but the latter had already sprung back in retreat to preemptively evade his retaliatory attack. Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to the assailant in question, and an incredulous look appeared on Lei Yus's face as he yelled, "Wen Zhang, what the hell are you doing?" At this moment, Wen Zhang's facial features were twisted with intense resentment, and he had caught everyone completely off guard with his sneak attack. Taoist Master Tao Yin had just slain the dark heaven's devilish deity, and a sense of relief and complacency had inevitably welled up in his heart. That was the opportunity that Wen Zhang had pounced on to make his move. "What am I doing? I'm going to kill this shameless, biased old bastard," Wen Zhang roared in a deranged manner. "Why, have you gone insane? He's our master, we owe everything to him," Lei Yus yelled in a furious and incredulous voice. "If he's truly our master, as you say, then why is it that he's only passed down the almighty sword formation to you? In his eyes, I've never been good enough compared to you. He was never even willing to give me a chance. What did I do to deserve this?" Wen Zhang roared as his eyes seethed with resentment. Lei Yus was rendered speechless upon hearing this, while Taoist Master Tao Yin's complexion had turned deathly pale. Wen Zhang's blade had pierced straight through his dantian, and he couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood as he pulled the blade out of his own body. A concerned look appeared in Lei Yus's eyes upon seeing this, and he was just about to continue reprimanding Wen Zhang when Taoist Master Tao Yin raised a hand to stop him. "I am already aware of the resentment Wen Zhang harbors in his heart, and I spoke about it with him in private. I thought I had already resolved the matter, but it seems like he was never able to truly let go of his resentment, and that was what the old devil had taken advantage of," Taoist Master Tao Yin said as he wiped the blood from his lips. "What are you saying, Master?" Lei Yus asked with a perplexed expression. "That old devil has mastered the laws of inner demons, and his forte is to fan the flames of the deepest, darkest desires in one's heart. It looks like Wen Zhang has fallen prey to his power," Taoist Master Tao Yin sighed. A look of realization appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Finally, I get to exact my revenge." Wen Zhang cackled as his expression became even more twisted and deranged. Taoist Master Tao Yin quickly took a golden pill to suppress his own injuries, then turned his gaze to Wen Zhang. To everyone's surprise, despite his fiery personality, at this moment, he was gazing upon Wen Zhang with nothing but sympathy in his eyes. All of a sudden, he vanished from the spot, only to abruptly reappear behind Wen Zhang. Wen Zhang immediately swung around, before lashing out in retaliation, only for Taoist Master Dao Yin to grab onto his arm before wrenching it downward. Wen Zhang felt as if a massive mountain were suddenly weighing down upon his arm, sending him falling forward onto the ground. Taoist Master Dao Yin took advantage of this opportunity to raise his other hand, following which a streak of needle-like light shot out of his fingertip before piercing into Wen Zhang's glabella. Wen Zhang's entire body instantly shuddered violently as if he had been struck by lightning, and he fell unconscious on the spot, much to Lei Yu's relief. However, his relief soon turned to horror as he cast his gaze toward the edge of the destroyed altar, where a cloud of black mist had emerged, and it was swirling incessantly, forming a stormy, black vortex that was around 10 feet in height. No one was able to pinpoint the moment that the vortex had appeared. As it revolved faster and faster, the black light within it glowed brighter and brighter. All of a sudden, the vortex fell still, and a slightly hunched-over male figure emerged from the black light within. The man had skin that was as black as ink, and his eyes were very peculiar in appearance. His left pupil was glowing with bright, purple light, as if there were a purple nebulous cloud swirling around inside, while his right pupil was filled with murky, azure light. The man's face was very angular, with a tall nose and sharp, thin lips. He should have been a rather handsome middle-aged man, but with his head of disheveled gray hair and his thick beard, he appeared more like an unkempt elderly man. After the man emerged from the vortex, he immediately crouched down before wrapping his arms around his own knees, then began rocking back and forth while mumbling something unintelligible to himself. Everyone was looking on with perplexed expressions when all of a sudden, a burst of black light emerged over the man's back, forming a black vortex that was roughly a foot in diameter. Peculiar looks appeared on everyone's faces upon seeing this, and all of a sudden, a translucent, black thread emerged from each of their glabellas, even those of the already deceased devilish beings, following which the black threads drifted directly toward the vortex on the man's back. In the instant that the black thread flew out of Han Li's glabella, he immediately reached out to try and catch it for a closer examination, but it passed straight through his hand as if it had no substantial form. Meanwhile, all of the cultivators waiting outside the Ian Pagoda had already split up into groups and factions, waiting for the return of everyone in the pagoda. It had already been a very long time since Lei Yus and the others first entered the pagoda, and the people waiting outside had begun to grow rather agitated. Some conflicts had even arisen between hostile factions during this time, but they were ultimately all de-escalated without much trouble. At the moment, it was approaching dusk outside the pagoda, and most of the cultivators were seated in meditation. Right at this moment, a translucent, black thread emerged from all of their glabellas. All of the black threads converged in the sky, forming a dark cloud that drifted toward the Ian Pagoda before vanishing into it. Everyone outside, the pagoda followed the dark cloud to the pagoda, where they looked on with perplexed expressions as it vanished right before their eyes. Immediately thereafter, many people began to depart from the pagoda, dispersing in all directions. Meanwhile, the same translucent, black threads were flying out of the bodies of all of the remaining living beings trapped on all levels of the Ian Pagoda, and all of these black threads traveled toward the same final destination, namely the black vortex behind the disheveled, middle-aged man. Han Li watched as countless black threads converged toward the man from all directions, and a peculiar feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. As that black thread was emerging from his glabella, he had suddenly felt a sense of lightness and clarity in his consciousness, as if something had been weighing down on his consciousness this entire time, but it had finally been removed. However, what was rather unsettling to him was that he had no idea when this black thread had appeared in his consciousness, and it had somehow been able to completely avoid the detection of his spirit refinement technique. In reality, this was a question that had occurred to everyone else present as well. None of them received any inkling that anything had been amiss, and it was only after these black threads had emerged from their bodies that they felt a change in their mental state. All of a sudden, the black vortex behind the middle-aged man faded away, and he rose up from the ground before letting loose a loud yawn while stretching lazily, as if he had just awoken from a long slumber. At this point, his aura had swelled to the pinnacle of the great encompassment stage, and every single movement of his seemed to be able to affect the space around him. However, his aura then gradually became more and more restrained until it was completely subdued, giving him the appearance of an innocuous, deranged man dressed in shabby clothes. Judging from the grim and horrified looks on the faces of Taoist Master Tao Yin and the other Almighty Sword sect cultivators, this man had to have been none other than the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. "Hooray, all of you," the man asked in a perplexed manner, but as soon as his voice trailed off, a golden pillar of fire came crashing down upon him from the heavens, sending him sprawling forward before sinking into the ground. The pillar of fire seemed to have been holding the weight of 1,000 mountains, and the ground was fracturing violently despite the powerful fortification restrictions in the palace. Hanli turned to discover a bright red thread around the Aeon Divine Lamp, indicating that Taoist Master Tao Yin had expended his own blood essence to use the Aeon Divine Lamp to unleash that attack upon the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. Only after a long while did the pillar of golden flames fade away, and everyone's attention was focused on the massive crater on the ground, where the man's aura had suddenly become completely undetectable. Right as everyone was looking on with bated breath, a pained groan suddenly rang out from within the crater, immediately following which a figure drifted out from within in a wraith-like manner, leaving an afterimage behind as they sped over to Taoist Master Tao Yin in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Tao Yin had been on his guard this entire time, and he immediately lashed out, sending bursts of golden flames flying out of the Aeon Divine Lamp before raining down upon the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. However, the Dark Heaven's devilish deity made no attempt to take evasive measures as he sped directly into the fiery storm, and a layer of dense, black light emerged over his fist as he swung them through the air, unleashing a barrage of countless black fist projections. The storm of fist projections clashed against the flurry of golden flames, and the former was able to easily eradicate the latter. However, after the golden flames faded away, a burst of five-colored light came sweeping toward the Dark Heaven's devilish deity, having been unleashed by the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation. "Piss off!" The Dark Heaven's devilish deity grumbled in a displeased voice as he rushed headfirst into the vast expanse of five-colored light, upon which his body instantly exploded into a cloud of black mist. Before Taoist Master Tao Yin had a chance to react, the cloud of black mist was already upon him, and a hand came reaching out of it before forcefully striking his chest. Taoist Master Tao Yin let loose a pained cry as he was sent flying back through the air, and only then did the cloud of black mist fully reform into the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. Taoist Master Tao Yin was already carrying very severe injuries, and this palm strike only further compounded his woes. After tumbling to the ground, he threw up several mouthfuls of blood before falling unconscious. Han Li and the others were all astonished to see this. Not only did the Dark Heaven's devilish deity not fear the flames of the Aeon Divine Lamp, he was also able to shrug off the attacks of the five-elemental Great Annihilation with ease, and that was a feat that even Chi Mozi wasn't confident in his own ability to replicate. After wounding Taoist Master Tao Yin, the Dark Heaven's devilish deity didn't continue to go after him. Instead, he turned to stare at the Aeon Divine Lamp that had trapped him for so many years, and it was unclear what he was thinking. Lei Yus wanted to fly over to Taoist Master Dao Yin's side, but he was afraid that doing so would incur the wrath of the dark heaven's devilish deities, so he could remain rooted to the spot, while cold sweat flowed down from his forehead. I was enjoying a good nap. Surely you didn't have to wake me up so unceremoniously. The dark heaven's devilish deity yawned as he stretched lazily, while everyone looked on with tense expressions. All of a sudden, the dark heaven's devilish deity turned to spit in the direction of the Ian divine lamp, and it seemed as if he had recalled some unpleasant memory as he yelled, "Tai Sui, you old dog! I've been trapped here for far too long because of you. Where is my son right now? Tell me where my son is or prepare to lay down your life, do you hear me?" Han Li and the others were all flabbergasted to see this, struggling to draw a correlation between this emotionally unstable madman and the almighty devilish deity that had once terrorized an entire immortal region. "You're not going to tell me. Fine, then I'll just have to make you." The dark heaven's devilish deity pounced at the Ian divine lamp as he spoke. With Taoist Master Dao Yin unconscious and the altar destroyed, the lamp was left to fend for itself, and it released layers of golden light to oppose the dark heaven's devilish deity. The dark heaven's devilish deity continued to curse loudly as he swung his fists at the Ian divine lamp, while black mist surged out of his entire body like a volcanic eruption, causing the entire palace to tremble violently. Han Li could see an enormous figure rising up within the mist, and it seemed to the dark heaven's devilish deity's true devilish form, except it seemed to be a projection, rather than an entity of substance. Even so, the almighty aura erupting out of the cloud of black mist was still more than sufficiently awe-inspiring in its own right. The projection seemed to have 12 arms, which it was swinging incessantly through the air in a relentless barrage of attacks aimed at the Ian divine lamp, causing it to tremble violently. Large volumes of lamp oil spilled out in all directions, forming a golden sea of fire that swallowed up virtually the entire palace, forcing everyone to frantically retreat to the walls. The entire palace continued to shudder violently, while the figure in the cloud of black mist maintained its ferocious barrage. And at the same time, bursts of devilish chi were rising up from its body before crashing into the roof of the palace above. The Ian divine lamp remained unscathed, but the palace was beginning to give out. Finally, the roof of the Ian palace was blown apart amid a resounding boom, and everyone immediately flew out from within. Lei Yus was forced to abandon the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation as he hoisted the unconscious Taoist Master Dao Yin onto his back before fleeing the palace with Su Anqian and the other Almighty Sword sect cultivators. However, everyone had only just risen up into the air when an enormous black lotus flower restriction appeared outside the palace, encompassing the entire surrounding area within a radius of several dozen feet. Every single one of the lotus flower's countless petals was over 10,000 feet tall, and a vast expanse of dark clouds was gathering up above, giving off the same aura as the dark heaven's devilish deity. The Almighty Sword sect cultivators had no choice but to continue to rise up into the heavens, and a burst of radiant sword light erupted out of their bodies before fusing as one to form a giant, five-colored sword of light that struck the black lotus flower. A loud clang rang out as the five-colored sword was shattered, while the black lotus flower remained completely unscathed. "Stop causing a commotion. Just give me some peace and quiet," the dark heaven's devilish deity yelled in a disgruntled manner as he looked up from the Ian divine lamp, then made a grabbing motion up toward the sky, and a giant hand instantly descended from above, capturing all of the Almighty Sword sect cultivators. With a casual toss, the giant hand threw them heavily back down into the palace, following which tendrils of black mist rose up in the air, forming a series of powerful black whips that came crashing down upon the Almighty Sword sect cultivators with unrivaled power. None of you are getting away after rousing me from my slumber, the dark heaven's devilish deity yelled, and Han Li and the others all flew back to the Ian Palace before hovering in the air above it. Han Li raised an eyebrow at the sight of the dark heaven's devilish deity's strange behavior, and he couldn't help but ask through voice transmission, "Fellow Taoist Worm 3, why does it feel like this dark heaven's devilish deity isn't quite all there?" Worm 3 had no response for this. Right at this moment, the cloud of black mist in the palace began to rapidly shrink, and it didn't take long before the dark heaven's devilish deity was revealed again. "What the hell is wrong with this thing? Why can't I break it?" he grumbled at the Ian divine lamp, which remained completely unscathed. He then turned his gaze to the abandoned five-elemental Great Annihilation formation, and an intrigued look appeared on his face as he murmured to himself, "What's this? It looks rather fun. Maybe I should take it for a spin." He then jumped into the formation, while everyone else looked on with dazed expressions. Upon entering the formation, a puzzled look appeared on his face as he murmured to himself, "How do I use this thing again? Oh, I've got it." As soon as his voice trailed off, 5 bursts of immortal spiritual power erupted out of his body, forming 5 pillars of light that fell upon the 5 immortal treasures in the formation. In the span of no more than 20 seconds, he had completed a process of basic refinement on all 5 of the 4th-tier immortal treasures. Immediately thereafter, he began to chant an incantation, and all of the immortal treasures instantly lit up. The 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation was operating again, and it conjured up a 5-colored ball of light around the dark heaven's devilish deity. Everyone was looking on with perplexed expressions, wondering what the dark heaven's devilish deity was doing when he suddenly made a hand seal, and numerous streaks of light burst out of his hand before flying into the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation. The 5-colored ball of light conjured up by the formation instantly began glowing even brighter, and a burst of bone-chilling destructive force began to spread through the interior of the light barrier. An excited look appeared on the dark heaven's devilish deity's face, and he only had time to give a yell of exultation before his body disintegrated into a cloud of black dust particles. Everyone in the palace looked on in deathly silence, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. "Did he just kill himself?" Fox 3 exclaimed in an incredulous manner. "No, he's not dead, but he certainly is insane," Han Li sighed. As soon as his voice trailed off, a cloud of black mist emerged within the ball of 5-colored light, then condensed to reform the dark heaven's devilish deity, and he was chortling with glee. "It's been so long since I've taken a bath, now." Before he had a chance to finish his sentence, his body disintegrated once again under another burst of destructive power released by the formation, but it didn't take long before he was reformed again. "I can bathe to my heart's content." The dark heaven's devilish deity continued where his previous sentence had left off, immediately following which his body exploded for a 3rd time. "There's definitely a few screws loose up there," Fox 3 communicated to Worm 3 and Han Li through voice transmission. Everyone continued to watch as the cycle of destruction and reformation repeated itself over and over again, and with each rebirth, the dark heaven's devilish deity's body seemed to become more resilient, making it more and more difficult for the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation to destroy him. The dark heaven's devilish deity began to swim through the air in a leisurely fashion, alternating between the backstroke and the doggy paddle. And he was thoroughly enjoying himself, paying no heed to the fact that he had an audience. As the attacks from the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation became less and less effective, the dark heaven's devilish deity began to grow bored, and he made a hand seal before raising his hands to the heavens, injecting another torrent of immortal spiritual power into the 5 immortal treasures, which glowed radiantly, while releasing 5 bursts of light of different colors into the 5-colored light barrier. A burst of destructive power that was far more formidable than before surged through the light barrier, and the dark heaven's devilish deity's body instantly exploded into dust. At the same time, the 5-colored light barrier began trembling incessantly, as a series of fist-sized balls of 5-colored light split off from it before flying through the air in all directions. The balls of light weren't very large, but all of them contained immense destructive power. Han Li and the others certainly possessed the physical constitution and cultivation base to match the dark heaven's devilish deity, and they hurriedly took evasive measures to protect themselves. A string of resounding booms rang out within the palace as its walls were blasted full of holes, and it didn't appear as if it would be able to stand for much longer. Han Li had already flown back in retreat to get as far away from the remains of the Ian Palace as possible, but right at this moment, Chi Mosey suddenly appeared beside him with that black axe in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, he swung the axe in Han Li's direction close to 20 times. A flurry of black axe projections instantly swept directly toward Han Li, forcing him to channel his reversal true axis ability before rising up further into the air. However, as he did so, a ball of 5-colored light came hurtling directly toward him on an unavoidable collision path, placing him in a situation of dire peril. In this dire situation, Han Li could only channel his heavenly baleful purgatory arts with all his might before swinging a fist at the oncoming ball of 5-colored light. A layer of golden ripples erupted out of his fist, forming layers upon layers of fist projections that swept toward the ball of 5-colored light. The two clashed, and the fist projections exploded one after another, but the time law powers within them weren't able to slow down the ball of 5-colored light very much at all, so they hadn't bought him much time. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and his 36 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords combined into one at his behest before falling into his grasp. There was no time for him to swing the sword, so he could only use it as a protective barrier. A vast expanse of golden lightning erupted out of the sword in a frenzy, resembling a giant, golden, lightning hand that enveloped the ball of 5-colored light to impede its advance. More and more arcs of golden lightning continued to erupt out of the sword before being destroyed by the ball of 5-colored light, and an impasse ensued. Worm 3 and Fox 3 immediately flew over to Han Li's side, protecting him from further attacks from Chi Mosey. However, instead of harassing Han Li any further, Chi Mosey flew back through the air before landing on a giant pile of rubble roughly 10,000 feet away. At the moment, Xingshan was hiding behind the pile of rubble with a horrified look on his face. Only after several seconds had passed did the eruption of balls of 5-colored light finally begin to subside, and Han Li turned to Chi Mosey with a cold look in his eyes. Right at this moment, a figure abruptly appeared beside Han Li without any warning, stirring up no spatial fluctuations or spiritual chi fluctuations at all, as he reached out to grab onto Han Li's sword-wielding arm. The figure was none other than the dark heaven's devilish deity, and Han Li's trio was naturally very much taken aback by his sudden emergence from the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation. Han Li's throat was feeling a little dry as he turned his gaze to the dark heaven's devilish deity, whose aura had become even more condensed and restrained, as if much of the impurities in his body had been eradicated from the repeated baptisms he had undergone within the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation. It's been a very long time since I've seen the Great 5-elemental illusion mantra in action. Come, let's have a little spar together, the dark heaven's devilish deity said. Please don't make jokes at my expense, senior. I'm clearly no match for you, Han Li hurriedly replied as he attempted to withdraw his arm, but to no avail. Hence, he could only activate his infernal devilish eyes to try and search for any weak points in the dark heaven's devilish deity's body. You've also mastered an ocular secret technique of our holy race. You certainly are a rare talent, the dark heaven's devilish deity remarked, immediately identifying Han Li's infernal devilish eyes. He then raised an eyebrow as he continued, "Who is your master? How have you mastered even the heavenly baleful purgatory arts?" Han Li was astonished to hear this, and he was terrified that the dark heaven's devilish deity would be able to uncover even more of his secrets, so he hurriedly replied, "Your vast wealth of knowledge and experience is truly astounding, Senior. My master is Patriarch Myro of the True Mantra sect. Have you heard of him?" "So your master is that fat monk. That makes sense, considering your primary cultivation arts is the great 5 elemental illusion mantra. I knew it. I'm a genius," the dark heaven's devilish deity said with an elated nod, looking much more like a small child who had solved a difficult puzzle than a great encompassment cultivator. "Your wisdom is truly unmatched, Senior," Han Li praised. "May I ask that you release me now?" Sure enough, the dark heaven's devilish deity became even more elated upon receiving praise from Han Li, and he let go of Han Li's arm as he said in a proud manner, "You're not that good to look at, but you're a smart kid. When it comes to knowledge and experience, very few people can compare with me. If you have any questions, then I suggest you take full advantage of this opportunity and raise them to me. I'm in a good mood right now, so I'm happy to provide you with the enlightenment that you seek." Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he didn't know what to make of this situation, so he said, "I wouldn't dare to trouble you with my trivial questions, Senior." "Are you trying to make it so that I'm unable to keep a promise? I told you to ask me questions, so you have to ask," the dark heaven's devilish deity demanded with an angry look on his face. Worm 3 and Fox 3 were standing beside Han Li, no more than 20 to 30 feet from the dark heaven's devilish deity, and they were looking on with flabbergasted expressions, not daring to advance or retreat. Chimozi faltered slightly upon seeing this, following which a sly grin appeared on his face. Lei Yus and the others were still unable to get away, so they could only secretly feed Taoist Master Dao Yin some pills, while the dark heaven's devilish deity was distracted with Han Li. "In that case, there is a question that I would like to ask. Have you seen a gold-devouring immortal here, Senior?" Han Li asked in a respectful manner. Even though there existed an agreement between him and Klin, he still couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at the fact that Klin had been missing ever since he first entered the 7th level. "I have," the dark heaven's devilish deity replied without any hesitation. "Where?" Han Li hurriedly. "I don't remember, it was too long ago. I remember that he made for a really good punching bag, so I gave him a beating to stave off boredom. Come to think of it, I haven't seen him in a very long time," the dark heaven's devilish deity mused. Glynn had indeed mentioned being beaten by an old madman during his previous venture into the 7th level, so this corroborated his story. "Wait, that doesn't make sense. You've been trapped in this altar in the Ian Palace this entire time. How could you possibly have met him before?" Han Li asked. "You say I've been trapped here. What a joke. I only chose to stay in this place so I can sleep without being interrupted. If I wanted to come out, no one could have stopped me," the dark heaven's devilish deity protested in a displeased manner. "My apologies, Senior. It seems I misunderstood the situation," Han Li hurriedly said. Back when he had first laid eyes upon the formation through the hole that Worm 3 had blasted into the altar, he had already noticed that something was a little off about it. Thinking back now, it seemed like the formation had already somehow lost the ability to serve its intended purpose. If the dark heaven's devilish deity really had been trapped in there while slowly having his cultivation base whittled away, then the energy fluctuations in the formation definitely wouldn't have been so placid, and that observation was what had struck Han Li as strange at the time. What kind of bullshit question is this? You should raise some more difficult questions, the dark heaven's devilish deity demanded. Like what? Han Li asked in a perplexed manner. Like questions related to cultivation. Come to think of it, those won't be very difficult for me to answer either. The dark heaven's devilish deity mused as he scratched his own head. Han Li raised an eyebrow, and a question really did occur to him. The cultivation art for the infernal devilish eyes claims that these eyes will allow me to see through all illusions and restrictions. So why is it that there are many illusory formations and restrictions in this pagoda that I've been unable to see through? That's not a very difficult question, but I can answer it for you. Have you taken in any devilish chi during your cultivation of the infernal devilish eyes? The dark heaven's devilish deity asked. Of course. After all, the foundation of this ocular ability comes from using devilish chi to cleanse one's eyes, Han Li replied. I figured as much. You're using a devilish cultivation art, so I'm assuming you drew upon your own devilish chi instead of devilish chi from the outside world. Hence, there should be no issues with the purity of the devilish chi that you've taken in. In that case, the problem must lie in the fact that you've cultivated other spirit eye abilities in the past. The dark heaven's devilish deity deduced, and he was suddenly looking much more focused and sane. Your deduction is perfect, Senior. I have indeed cultivated another spirit eye ability in the past, Han Li praised, and this time it came from a much more earnest place. He had previously cultivated the bright-sight spirit eyes, and it seemed that some conflict existed between these two ocular abilities. The cultivation methods for different spirit eye abilities are fundamentally different, so they'll inevitably conflict with one another. All you need to do is... With that, the dark heaven's devilish deity provided a concise solution to Han Li's problem. With his question answered, Han Li was feeling a bit more reassured and he said, "Thank you, Senior. I have one more question. May I ask why you've trapped all of us here?" The dark heaven's devilish deity was instantly rooted to the spot upon hearing this, and he began packing back and forth as he fell into deep thought. What was I going to do again? I was going to do something, but I can't remember. He murmured to himself as he sat down onto the ground, while everyone else looked on with exasperated expressions. After some time, the dark heaven's devilish deity seemed to have suddenly recalled something, and a look of urgency appeared on his face as he exclaimed in a frantic voice, "I remember now, I'm looking for my wife and son. Have you seen them? Do you know where they are?" "I'm afraid not, Senior," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "You don't know where they are. How can you not know where they are?" The dark heaven's devilish deity yelled in a furious voice. Right at this moment, Chi Mozi stepped forward with a faint smile as he declared, "I know where they are." As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li saw a black shadow flash past his eyes, immediately following which Chi Mozi was lifted up into the air by the shoulders. The dark heaven's devilish deity had appeared right beside him in a wraith-like manner, moving so quickly that no one had a chance to react. A burst of tremendous power descended upon Chi Mozi, instantly immobilizing him despite his great encompassment stage cultivation base, and his smile immediately stiffened slightly. Everyone reflexively dispersed to open up some distance between themselves and the dark heaven's devilish deity, and while Han Li was very relieved to have finally been released, he was also a little concerned about what Chi Mozi was up to. Chi Mozi was a very cunning and calculating man, so the fact that he had chosen to speak up at a time like this definitely wasn't good news. On top of that, the dark heaven's devilish deity was not in a sound state of mind, so there was no telling what his reaction would be to what Chi Mozi was about to say. However, there was nothing that he could do for now aside from watch as the situation unfolded. "Where are my wife and son? Tell me," the dark heaven's devilish deity yelled as he shook Chi Mozi violently by the shoulders. Chi Mosey felt as if his shoulders were about to be fractured by Chi Mosey's iron grip, and he fought back the pain as he forced a smile onto his own face and asked, "Your name is Shikangmo, and your wife is Mistress Jin Ling, is that right?" Shikangmo. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. "That's right, so you really do know. Take me to them right now," the dark heaven's devilish deity exclaimed in an ecstatic voice, and his grip unconsciously tightened slightly from excitement. A pained look appeared on Chi Mosey's face as he hurriedly said, "Before that, please put me down. I'm afraid I might come apart at the seams if you grip me any tighter." "Oh, my apologies," the dark heaven's devilish deity said as he released Chi Mosey. "All right, take me to them now. I know where Mistress Jin Ling and your son are, but I can't take you to them," Chi Mosey replied with a shake of his head. "What? Why?" the dark heaven's devilish deity asked as a murderous gleam flashed through his eyes, and he reached out to grab Chi Mosey by the throat. A tangible aura of baleful chi erupted out of his body, causing the nearby space to ripple and tremble violently. Han Li and the others were also enshrouded in this aura of baleful chi, and they felt as if they were standing in a freezing snowscape in the nude. It was an extremely unpleasant sensation, but they had no choice but to bear it. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Shi. It's not that I'm not willing to take you there," Chi Mosey hurriedly said. "The problem is that your wife and son are currently being held prisoner by Tao ancestor Kai Rong of the Fused Heavens Immortal region. You may be near invincible among great encompassment cultivators, but I presume that a Tao ancestor is still too formidable for you to oppose, right?" The dark heaven's devilish deity's fury instantly abated upon hearing this, and he seemed to have recovered some degree of rationality as he released Chi Mosey. "They're being held captive by that old hag. She's the Tao ancestor of essential fire laws, and even among all Tao ancestors, her powers rank in the top 10, so I'm no match for her for now. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Shi, I've already established an agreement with Tao ancestor Kai Rong, and she has agreed to release Mistress Jin Ling and your son in exchange for 2 items, Chi Mosey said. An ecstatic look instantly appeared on the dark heaven's devilish deity's face upon hearing this, and he hurriedly asked, "What are they? Tell me. I can give her even 20 things if she wants, let alone 2. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. "They are the Aeon Divine Lamp and the cultivation art for the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra. I came into the Tai Sui Immortal Manor in search of the Aeon Divine Lamp, but I've just so happened to run into someone cultivating the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra here as well. It looks like even the heavens are smiling down upon Mistress Jin Ling and your son," Chi Mosey said as he turned his gaze to Han Li. Han Li's expression instantly changed slightly upon hearing this. "This Aeon Divine Lamp is really annoying to look at, and I can't destroy it anyway, so you can have it," the dark heaven's devilish deity said, then flew over to the Aeon Divine Lamp in a flash. Even with the 5-colored altar destroyed, the Aeon Divine Lamp remained hovering in midair, giving a golden glow that provided the only light source in what was otherwise a vast expanse of inky darkness. "You have a way to capture the lamp?" Chi Mosey asked with a surprised expression. The Aeon Divine Lamp had remained completely unmoved in the face of the string of attacks unleashed by the dark heaven's devilish deity just now. "Of course, and I can do so with ease, just you watch," the dark heaven's devilish deity harumphed as he split up into 5 identical figures to surround the Aeon Divine Lamp. Immediately thereafter, the 5 dark heaven's devilish deities each reached out with one hand in unison, and 5 bursts of black light flew out of the palms of their hands. The space around the Aeon Divine Lamp was torn open like a curtain, forming a circular spatial rift that was hundreds of feet in size. Turbulence of all types of different colors were surging through the spatial rift, and it was giving off a burst of tremendous suction force that acted upon everything in the nearby vicinity. Everyone hurriedly retreated even further upon seeing this for fear of being devoured by the spatial rift. But even though the five dark heavens devilish deities were standing right beside the spatial rift, they remained completely unaffected. The Aeon divine lamp also remained completely still, somehow unmoved by the violent spatial turbulence around it. Deep within the spatial rift, a series of runes in the shape of golden chains intertwined with one another RTO form an enormous, golden net, which spread out in all directions as far as the eyes could see, and the Aeon divine lamp was right at the center of the net. A bewildered look appeared on Han Li's face at the sight of the golden net, and everyone else was also surprised to see that something like this was lurking behind the Aeon divine lamp. The five dark heavens devilish deities each held one hand aloft to stabilize the spatial rift, while swinging their other hand through the air like blades, and five massive, black palm projections were instantly released. The palm projections were enshrouded in devilish chi, and they were giving off no spiritual chi fluctuations, law powers, or any energy fluctuations of any description, for that matter. All there was nothingness, a type of nothingness that could erode everything. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of the five black palm projections. His heavenly baleful purgatory arts and infernal devilish eyes were both devilish abilities, but he couldn't even hold a candle to the dark heavens devilish deity when it came to utilization of devilish chi. If he could utilize devilish chi to the same degree of proficiency as the dark heavens devilish deity, then he would be able to erode the immortal treasures of Chi Mozi and other heavenly court cultivators in battle, thereby giving him a large advantage. The five palm projections swept toward the golden net, eradicating all of the spatial turbulence in their wake. As soon as the palm projection struck the golden net, the latter immediately began to tremble violently while giving off radiant, golden light. However, the golden light was no match for the formidable devilish chi released by the palm projections, and it was being quickly whittled away. The Aeon divine lamp shuddered as a sea of golden flames erupted out of it before sweeping toward the five palm projections. But it was already too late, and the palm projections were able to overwhelm the golden net before the golden flames had a chance to reach them. A loud tearing sound rang out as five huge gashes were torn into the golden net, and its connection with the Aeon divine lamp was completely severed. The entire net shuddered violently while flashing erratically, then exploded into countless specks of golden spiritual light. At the same time, a layer of golden radiance appeared in the sky outside the Aeon Palace, basking the clouds in a golden sheen, and formidable time-law power fluctuations were sweeping through the air, while the world's origin chi was also churning violently. Countless specks of five-colored light emerged, stretching as far as the eyes could see, and they seemed to fill the entirety of heaven and earth, while the enormous mountain down below also began to tremble violently. However, it didn't take long before the golden light faded away, and the time-law powers that were originally pervasively present throughout the entire seventh level of the Aeon Pagoda also vanished in the same instant. The same applied to the other 6 levels as well, and from the outside of the Aeon Pagoda, one could see the golden flame at the top of the pagoda flash a few times before being abruptly snuffed out. Inside the ruins of the Aeon Palace, the Aeon divine lamp shuddered violently in the wake of the golden net's destruction, and it began to fly toward the surrounding spatial turbulence. Right at this moment, one of the dark heaven's devilish deities swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a streak of black light that dragged the Aeon divine lamp to his side. Meanwhile, the other 4 dark heaven's devilish deities drifted back in retreat, and the massive spatial rift was instantly closed, restoring the palace to a state of peace and quiet. All of this had taken place in the span of just a few seconds, And that was all it took for the dark heaven's devilish deity to obtain the Aeon divine lamp, putting his peak-rate encompassment stage powers on full display. Han Li and the others were awestruck by his unfathomable powers, while Lei Yus and the Almighty Sword Sect cultivators were horrified to see that he had captured the Aeon divine lamp. The 5 dark heavens devilish deities fused back into one, then tossed the Aeon divine lamp at Chi Mozi, who caught it as a hint of excitement flashed through his eyes, only to be quickly concealed. The dark heavens devilish deity turned to Han Li, then tossed a purple jade slip at him as he demanded, "Give me a copy of the cultivation art for the great 5 elemental illusion mantra." Rest assured, Patriarch Miro and I are good friends, so I won't make you give me the cultivation art for nothing. Here's a 5 lightning true mantra that I obtained by chance from a set of ancient ruins. It's one of the most powerful lightning attribute cultivation arts in this realm, and it's not inferior in value compared with your great 5 elemental illusion mantra. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he caught the jade slip, but his mind was racing as he processed the situation. The dark heaven's devilish deity was clearly not in a sound state of mind, and he seemed to have placed his trust in Chi Mozi, so Han Li had to proceed with the utmost caution here. Before he had a chance to say anything, Worm 3 suddenly stepped forward, and a reincarnation palace mask appeared over her face as she urged, "Don't trust that man, Senior Shi. Not only is he a cultivator from the heavenly court, he's the current chief warden of the Immortal prison, and he's lying to you to try and lure you to the heavenly court so all of the Tao ancestors can target you at once. Fellow Taoist Han and I are both from the Reincarnation Palace. We are your true allies." The dark heaven's devilish deity's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and it seemed that a hint of rationality had returned to him. Chi Mozi seemed to have already anticipated this, and he remained calm and collected as he sneered, "I'm a cultivator of the heavenly court. What a joke! Given fellow Taoist Shi's vast wealth of knowledge and experience, would he not be able to tell if I were from the heavenly court? Why is your reincarnation palace trying to stop me from rescuing Mistress Jin Ling and young Master Shi? What are your intentions?" He seems to be using the time-severing flowing fire tome of the true mantra sect, which isn't a heavenly court cultivation art. The dark heaven's devilish deity mused to himself. "That's precisely correct, fellow Taoist Shi," Chi Mozi immediately said, not giving Han Li and Worm 3 any chance to interject. At the same time, he swept a sleeve through the air to release the withered bodies of the 3 devilish beings from earlier. "Fellow Taoist Shi, these 3 were once subordinates of yours, but they betrayed you and doomed you to be imprisoned in this place. I've killed these 3, and their 2 brothers were killed in the 5 elemental Great Annihilation formation, so you can rest easy now, knowing that they'll never be able to betray you again," Chi Mozi said, clearly sucking up to the dark heaven's devilish deity. The dark heaven's devilish deity flew into a rage at the sight of the 3 bodies, and he yelled, "Those ungrateful bastards! I treated them like my own brothers, yet they betrayed me at the most crucial juncture." He swept a sleeve through the air as he spoke, and the 3 bodies exploded into a cloud of gray dust that drifted away with the wind. Han Li and Worm 3 exchanged a concerned glance with each other upon seeing this. Chi Mozi was doing everything in his power to appease the dark heaven's devilish deity, and they were unable to match his efforts. "Give me the cultivation art for the great 5 elemental illusion mantra right now," the dark heaven's devilish deity demanded as he turned back to Han Li. "I wouldn't dare to not hand over the cultivation art to you, Senior. The problem is that I don't have the complete version. My master only gave me the first half of the cultivation art, so it won't do you any good," Han Li replied, making up an excuse on the spot. "What, you only have the first half?" A displeased look instantly appeared on the dark heaven's devilish deity's face upon hearing this. "Rest assured," Even though I don't have the complete version of the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra, I know where the complete version can be found. Right now, the true mantra sect has already been destroyed by the Heavenly Court, and in order to prevent the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra from being lost, my master sealed the cultivation art away in a special place that can only be accessed using a powerful time attribute Immortal treasure. I came to the Tai Sui Immortal Manor in order to obtain the Ian Divine Lamp so that I can retrieve the second half of the cultivation art. If you trust me, then please lend me the lamp, and I promise to return with the complete version of the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra in 10 years to help you save your wife and son. You can even accompany me there if you'd like, Han Li replied in a respectful manner. Chi Mozi's expression darkened significantly upon hearing this, while a contemplative look appeared on the dark heaven's devilish deity's face. Chi Mozi could sense that the tide was beginning to turn against him, and he hurriedly said, Han Li, how dare you tell such a blatant lie to fellow Taoist Shi? I saw our master pass down the complete version of the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra with my own 2 eyes. Don't believe him, fellow Taoist Shi. The cultivation art can be found in his storage tool or his memories, I'm certain of it. This was exactly what Han Li wanted, and he pounced on the opportunity, removing a storage tool from his body as he said, if you want to examine my storage tool, then feel free to do so. However, I want you to offer up your storage tool for Senior Shi's examination as well. I'm sure there will be things inside that will reveal your identity. Chi Mozi faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he was internally kicking himself for having failed to consider this countermeasure from Han Li. His storage tools contained many items from the Heavenly Court, including even his chief warden token. However, he couldn't afford to back down now, and with that in mind, he slipped off the storage ring on his finger as he harumphed coldly. Fine, we'll do as you say then. He had 2 storage tools, and this storage ring only contained some items that he used in battle, while all of his more important belongings were in the other storage tool, which was hidden quite well, so he was confident that Han Li wouldn't be able to find it. The dark heaven's devilish deity's mind was quite muddled to begin with, and he was beginning to grow very frustrated by the bickering between Han Li and Chi Mozi. However, right at this moment, he suddenly turned to a certain direction, then raised a hand to make a grabbing motion as he yelled, "Who's there?" The world's origin Chi, halfway up the giant mountain, converged violently to form an enormous black hand that grabbed onto a certain spot in the air, and Klin was plucked out of thin air. Before he had a chance to even struggle, the black hand vanished into thin air, then abruptly reappeared in the Ian Palace, having shrunk down significantly. The black hand then dissipated into thin air, dropping Klin onto the ground, and the dark heaven's devilish deity was ecstatic to see him. It's you. It's been so long since I've had a good punching bag, my prayers have been answered. Immediately thereafter, he appeared directly in front of Klin amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, before throwing a punch at him. A horrified look appeared on Klin's face upon seeing this, and he instantly transformed into a giant, gold-devouring beetle that was over 100 feet in size. The giant beetle swept its front legs forcefully through the air, releasing countless streaks of translucent, golden light that rained down upon the dark heaven's devilish deity. However, the dark heaven's devilish deity merely continued onward, taking no evasive measures, and the streaks of golden light merely passed through him in an innocuous fashion, as if there were no substance to his body. However, in the instant that the dark heaven's devilish deity's fist came into contact with the golden beetle's head, his body regained its substantial form, and the giant beetle was sent flying back through the air, before crashing into a nearby wall with a resounding thump. The walls of the Ian Palace were constructed from special materials, so they were very difficult to destroy even without the fortification of any restrictions. The almighty sword sect cultivators just so happened to have been gathered there, and Lei Yus and the others hurriedly dispersed, while carrying the still unconscious Taoist master Dao Yin away. After crashing into the wall, the giant beetle fell down onto the ground with a dazed look in its eyes, seemingly having had its mind scrambled by the force of the punch. A shallow fist indentation could be seen on its incredibly hard exoskeleton, but it hadn't shattered. Your shell has become a lot harder than last time. Looks like I don't have to hold back as much as before, the dark heaven's devilish deity remarked as he appeared beside the golden beetle once again, then threw another punch its way. The golden beetle instantly shrank down to only around the size of a human fist, then flew away at an incredible speed. However, the dark heaven's devilish deity was able to somehow get in front of it to intercept it in the blink of an eye as he chuckled. "You're not getting away." The golden beetle was sent flying once again by another almighty punch, and it crashed into another wall with a loud thump. Much of the golden light around the beetle's body was scattered from the force of the blow, and it involuntarily reverted back to its original size. "It's been a long time since I've gotten some exercise." The dark heaven's devilish deity chuckled to himself, then abruptly appeared beside the golden beetle once again before sending it flying with another punch. This time, the punch had struck the beetle on the body rather than its head, so it remained conscious and lucid, and as soon as it fell to the ground, it immediately laid flat against the ground in a submissive pose. "Please forgive me, Senior Shi, I shouldn't have tried to spy on you. Please spare me," the golden beetle implored, knowing that any further attempt to escape would be completely futile. "What are you rambling on about? I'm only just getting warmed up." The dark heaven's devilish deity harumphed coldly as he flew over to the golden beetle before kicking it away. His annoyance had been steadily mounting from Han Li and Chi Mozi's bickering, but he had no choice but to tolerate it for the sake of his wife and son, and Glin's arrival had presented him with the perfect opportunity to vent his frustration. Hence, the golden beetle was transformed into a true punching bag, being kicked and punched back and forth by the dark heaven's devilish deity. The dark heaven's devilish deity was using only his physical strength without injecting any law powers into his attacks, so even though Glin was being thoroughly bruised and battered, he hadn't sustained any severe injuries. Never had Han Li and the others witnessed such a farcical sight. A peak-grade encompassment cultivator was darting around back and forth right before their eyes, chasing around a golden beetle like a mortal chasing after a fly. Glin wanted to beg for mercy on several occasions, but he was always cut off by the dark heaven's devilish deity's blows. Everyone could only look on with dumbstruck expressions, while occasionally dodging to the side to avoid being struck by the flying Glin. The dark heaven's devilish deity had forbidden them from leaving, so they didn't dare to stray too far away for fear of incurring his wrath. Right at this moment, a streak of white light shot forth from afar, then faded to reveal the azure-robed man riding atop Lekima. Han Li, Fox 3, and Worm 3 were ecstatic to see him, while Chi Mozi was clearly less than enthused by his arrival. "Please have mercy, fellow Taoist dark heavens," the azure-robed man implored as he swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of gray light, attempting to break Glin's fall. However, Glin had been struck with such tremendous force that he tore straight through the gray light before crashing into a nearby wall, causing it to collapse. The dark heaven's devilish deity seemed to be in a much better mood after taking out his frustrations on Glin, and he turned to the azure-robed man as he asked, "What are you doing here, Liu Zizai? Are you trying to get in my way as well?" "I came here to congratulate you on regaining your freedom, fellow Taoist Shi. On top of that, my bonded soul tablet is here, and I've come to retrieve it now that the restriction here has been broken," Liu Zizai replied, only to have his expression instantly stiffen upon catching sight of the destroyed five-colored altar in the palace. His gaze then quickly turned to Chi Mozi, and his expression instantly darkened slightly. Meanwhile, Lekima was scouring its gaze over everyone in the palace, unable to detect who was in possession of its bonded soul tablet. I have some matters to attend to right now, so your bonded soul tablet will have to wait. Seeing as you're a corpse soul of Liu Qi's, I'll help you look for the tablet later, but for now, stay out of my way. The dark heaven's devilish deity harumphed coldly. So he's a corpse soul of Patriarch Liu Qi's. Han Li was instantly struck by a sense of enlightenment upon hearing this. With that in mind, it was no wonder that he had been reminded of Patriarch Liu Qi back when he first met Liu Zizai, and on top of that, the two of them had also mastered the same type of law powers. Han Li then shook his head to rid himself of these trivial thoughts, refocusing his attention on the situation at hand. All of a sudden, a thought seemed to have occurred to him, and he communicated something to Fox through voice transmission. Fox 3 took a glance at him, then quickly gave a barely perceptible nod. "You have my thanks then, fellow Taoist Shi," Liu Zizai replied with a nod. Right at this moment, Kalin's feeble voice rang out. "Save me, fellow Taoist Liu." His physical body was near indestructible, but the dark heaven's devilish deity's physical prowess was even more formidable, and after taking such an extensive beating, his entire body was riddled with wounds, and even all of his orifices were leaking golden blood, presenting a very sorry sight to behold. "Fellow Taoist Shi, you're a peak great encompassment cultivator with powers far superior to ours, so why go after Kalin? He may have been spying on the Ian Palace in secret earlier, but that was only for the sake of his bonded soul tablet, so please forgive him," Liu Zizai implored as he cupped his fist in a salute. "You can take him away. I feel a lot more loose and limber now that I've had some exercise, so I'll save him for next time," the dark heaven's devilish deity replied with a casual wave of his hand. Kalin shuddered slightly at the thought of a next time, but overall, he was very relieved to have finally been spared. "Thank you, fellow Taoist Shi," Liu Zizai said with an elated expression, then swept a sleeve through to release a burst of gray light that carried the golden beetle back to his side. The golden beetle reverted back to Kalin's human form, and his face was bruised and battered beyond recognition, presenting a rather comical sight to behold. With that, Liu Zizai was just about to depart when he suddenly took a glance at Fox 3, and an intrigued look appeared in his eyes as he stopped in his tracks. "Fellow Taoist Shi, now that the Ian Divine Lamp restriction has been broken, you and I have been freed. Do you have any plans from here onward? Would you be interested in paying our heavenly fox tribe a visit?" Liu Zizai asked. "I'll pass this time. I've found out where my wife and son are, and I'm going to rescue them so that I can finally be reunited with them. That fox den of yours probably stinks anyway," Dark Heaven's devilish deity chuckled in response. "Is that right? That's certainly fantastic news. Please allow me to offer my congratulations. May I ask how you managed to find out the whereabouts of your wife and son?" Liu Zizai asked. For some reason, a sense of foreboding welled up in Qi Mozi's heart at this line of questioning, and he secretly slid his right hand up his sleeve. "Fellow Taoist Qi Mozi here told me that he's going to take me to Jin Ling and my son," the dark heaven's devilish deity replied as he pointed at Qi Mozi. "You're going to trust him to take you to your wife and son. Are you not aware that he's the current chief warden of the Immortal prison?" Liu Zizai asked with a surprised expression. The dark heaven's devilish deity seemed to be quite trusting of Liu Zizai, and he immediately turned to Qi Mozi with a cold expression as he asked, "Why is he also saying that he's the chief warden of the Immortal prison? Is that true?" "Don't be fooled by their lies, fellow Taoist Shi," Qi Mozi hurriedly replied. "I think this will tell you all that you need to know, fellow Taoist Shi," Liu Zizai said as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a ball of gray light. On the surface of the ball of light was an image depicting the scene where Chi Mozi had approached the White Bone King and the Copper Lion King, and their conversation rang out as clear as day, while Chi Mozi presented his chief warden badge to them. "How dare you lie to me?" The dark heaven's devilish deity roared as he turned to Chi Mozi with a look of murderous rage in his eyes. But Chi Mozi was already prepared for the worst, and he instantly released his time-severing fire domain, encompassing everyone within it. Everyone was instantly immobilized within the time-severing fire domain, while Chi Mozi flew away as quickly as he could as a streak of golden light. "You won't trap me with this flimsy little time-severing fire domain of yours." The dark heaven's devilish deity roared as a burst of black light erupted out of his body in all directions, instantly tearing the time-severing fire domain apart. Immediately thereafter, he reached out with one hand, and an enormous black hand that took up half of the entire sky instantly emerged before grabbing down onto Chi Mozi. A burst of overwhelming compressive force converged toward Chi Mozi from all directions, slowing him down significantly. Yet right as he was about to be captured by the giant hand, a burst of blinding, golden light erupted out of his body, lighting up the entire sky. In the next instant, a ball of golden light that was thousands of feet in size appeared, resembling an incandescent, golden sun as it hurtled toward the giant, black hand. The two clashed with a resounding boom, and the nearby space shuddered violently before shattering into countless pieces. Chi Mozi fell out of the ball of golden light with blood flowing out of all of his orifices, yet even as he came plummeting toward the ground, he was still clutching the Ian divine lamp tightly in his hands. A burst of golden light emerged over his body, and he was able to stabilize himself before continuing to fly away without so much as a turn of his head. Even following his departure, the ball of golden light still remained, and it abruptly swelled even further in size as countless thin tendrils of golden flames erupted forth from within, instantly punching countless holes into the giant black hand. In the blink of an eye, the giant hand was completely eradicated. The dark heaven's devilish deity was looking up at the ball of golden light, with excitement glowing in his eyes, seemingly having already completely forgotten all about Chi Mozi. In the next instant, the ball of golden light transformed into a golden figure that was giving off an aura of unmatched authority, but his features were rather blurred and difficult to make out. Lei Yus and the Almighty Sword Sect cultivators were ecstatic to see this golden figure. "It's our patriarch." "I knew it. Our patriarch has never left this pagoda all these years." All of the Almighty Sword Sect cultivators immediately fell to their knees and began kowtowing to the golden figure in excitement and reverence. So that's why the Ian Divine Lamp is still so powerful even with no one controlling it. I should have figured that you had implanted a fragment of your soul within it, Tai Sui. The dark heaven's devilish deity harumphed coldly. The golden figure looked down at the dark heaven's devilish deity in silence, and in the next instant, black and golden light erupted from their bodies in unison before clashing with tremendous force. The half-ruined Ian Palace was instantly destroyed, but its ground remained intact, perhaps due to the presence of the five-elemental Great Annihilation Formation. Han Li and the others were sent flying by the shockwaves from the clash, and they took advantage of this opportunity to get far away from the dark heaven's devilish deity and the golden figure. While the dark heaven's devilish deity was locked in battle against Tai Sui's soul fragment, bursts of rumbling could be heard ringing out incessantly within the dark clouds in the sky, although there was no lightning to be seen. Gusts of fierce wind were sweeping through the air, while the ground trembled incessantly, and the entire Ian Pagoda seemed to be shaking. "Brother Han, we have to recover the Ian Divine Lamp from Chi Mozi," Worm 3 said with a serious expression. A hesitant look appeared on Han Li's face as he said, Chi Mozi is a very cunning and powerful great encompassment cultivator, and his powers will only have been further elevated now that he's in possession of the Ian Divine Lamp, so I don't think it would be wise to go after him. At this point, he had already been completely freed from the dark heaven's devilish deity's influence, so he was nowhere near as enticed by the idea of claiming the Ian Divine Lamp as before. Is Chi Mozi not a sworn enemy of yours, Brother Han? Surely you can't back down now, Worm 3 hurriedly said. That's true, but at the moment, there's a clear power disparity between us. On top of that, with the Ian Divine Lamp displaced, the restrictions in the pagoda have been undone, so it's most likely not a good idea to stay here, Han Li replied. All right, let me come clean to you, Brother Han. Not only has Chi Mozi taken the Ian Divine Lamp, he's also taken an item of great importance to our reincarnation palace, and it must be recovered. As a reincarnation disciple, you have an obligation to join me in this endeavor, Worm 3 insisted as a hint of urgency appeared in her eyes. Please don't try to force me into this, fellow Taoist Worm 3. I may be a reincarnation disciple, but no mission to recover the item in question has been assigned to me by the Reincarnation Palace, so I have no obligation to do anything, Han Li countered. Worm 3's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and after a brief silence she suddenly switched to voice transmission as she said, Brother Han, if I recall correctly, you're very close with someone called Jin Tong, right? Right now, they're not in the best of situations. What do you mean by that? Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. It's a long story, too long for me to tell now, but all you need to know is that taking down Chi Mozi is of great importance to saving your friend as well, so please do not hesitate any longer. Chi Mozi has mastered the laws of time, so without your help, it's going to be very difficult for me to go after him, Worm 3 urged as a hint of agitation appeared on her face. While the two of them were conversing with each other, Fox 3 and Liu Zizai had already set off in pursuit of Chi Mozi. After all, the latter's bonded soul tablet was still in Chi Mozi's possession. In that case, I'm willing to help you, but in exchange, I want the Ian Divine Lamp. Is that acceptable to you? Han Li asked. Given his bad blood with Chi Mozi, he was also very tempted to take advantage of this opportunity to hunt him down. However, he naturally wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to have Worm 3 owe him a favor. Furthermore, the mention of Jin Tong also had him feeling a little concerned, and that gave him even more of an incentive to go after Chi Mozi. All right, I can agree to that condition, but everything else in Chi Mozi's possession has to be left to me, Worm 3 replied without any hesitation. She was naturally aware that Han Li was taking advantage of the situation to his own benefit, but that didn't matter to her. Her primary objective was to obtain the black tablet, and outside of that, everything was negotiable. Han Li naturally raised no objections to this, and Worm 3 immediately departed. Right at this moment, a streak of silver light shot forth from the ruins of the Ian Palace. It was the Essence Fire Raven, and clasped in its beak was the white bead that was one of the 5 immortal treasures in the 5-elemental Great Annihilation Formation. Looks like the formation is no longer able to function without anyone operating it. With that in mind, Han Li stowed the Fire Raven away, then took a glance at the ongoing battle between the Dark Heaven's devilish deity and the Tai Sui soul fragment. And he was just about to depart when he spotted Kalin and Lekama, both of which had adopted their human forms and were searching for something within the wreckage of the Ian Palace. He flew over to them with a smile as he said, "Come and help us recover the lamp from Chi Mozi, fellow Taoists." "Go away, I'm busy," Lekama grumbled without even bothering to spare a glance at Han Li. "How about you, fellow Taoist? You promised to help me take down a sworn enemy of mine, and he's right over there," Han Li said as he pointed into the distance, where Chi Mozi had been intercepted by Worm 3 and the others. I have no intention of going back on my promise, but right now I have more important things to do, and it looks like you have more than enough allies to help you deal with that enemy of yours," Glyn replied. "That's a real shame. I guess I'll be keeping these two things to myself then," Han Eli said with a smile. Glyn and Lekema immediately turned to him upon hearing this, and they discovered that he was holding a pair of crimson tablets in his hand. Han Li had originally intended to keep these two bonded soul tablets hidden, particularly Lin's one, as having it in his possession would ensure that Glyn would be at his mercy in his inevitable future showdown against Jin Tong. Hence, Han Li had placed a restriction upon them and placed them into the flower branch domain so that they couldn't be detected, but he had no choice but to bring them out now in order to convince them to help him. "So you did get it. Rest assured, I promised you handsome compensation in exchange for my bonded soul tablet, and I fully intend to follow through on that promise," Lekema said with a wide grin. "I appreciate it, but all that can wait until we've taken down Chi Mozi," Han Li said as he stowed the pair of tablets away. "You cunning little bastard. Fine, we'll do as you say," Lekema grumbled with a displeased expression, then instantly vanished from the spot as a white whirlwind, while Han Li and Glyn also set off after him. At this point, the almighty sword sect cultivators had already fled to hundreds of kilometers away, and Taoist Master Dao Yin finally regained consciousness while being carried on Lei Yu's back. He turned to discover the chaotic scene behind him, and he asked in a slightly feeble voice, "What happened?" Lei Yus was ecstatic to see that Taoist Master Dao Yin had woken up, and he hurriedly set him down before giving him a brief recount of everything that had happened during his stint of unconsciousness. "This is terrible," Taoist Master Dao Yin sighed after hearing Lei Yus's recount. "With the Ian Divine Lamp displaced, all of the restrictions in the Ian Pagoda have been lifted. If those beings imprisoned in the pagoda manage to escape, then countless lives will surely be lost across the entire Golden Origin Immortal region. There's nothing we can do about that, Sect Master. We're extremely fortunate just to still be alive," an elder said. "No, I have to do something. The reputation of the Almighty Sword Sect cannot be tarnished by my incompetence. Even our Patriarch's soul fragment is currently still battling the Dark Heaven's devilish deity, and I have to do my part too. I have to recover the lamp and seal away all of the malicious beings in the pagoda again, even if it costs me my life," Taoist Master Dao Yin declared in a determined manner. "Master, the lamp has already been displaced for quite some time, so all of the beings imprisoned in the pagoda have most likely already escaped. The disciples of our sect stationed outside the pagoda should be able to impede those beings for some time. So what we need to do now is leave the Ian Pagoda as soon as possible and activate the backup measures that our Patriarch left in place," Lei Yus hurriedly urged. "You're saying we should destroy the Ian Pagoda and this entire space?" Taoist Master Dao Yin asked. "But if we do that, won't all of the cultivators in the secret area be killed as well?" Su Anqian asked. "I'm afraid that's a sacrifice that must be made. If those forces of evil are allowed to escape into the immortal region, then far more people will lose their lives," Lei Yu said in a grim manner. "Given the urgency of the situation, this is the only course of action available to us. These people came into this secret area to satisfy their own greed, so they only have themselves to blame for losing their lives here. The lamp must be recovered to restore the glory of our sect," Taoist Master Dao Yin declared with a solemn expression. Su Anqian opened her mouth to say something, but ultimately remained silent. The group then set off toward the edge of the 7th level. With all of the restrictions undone, they could directly exit the pagoda from there. Not long after their departure, a nearby black rock suddenly rolled away to the side, following which Qingshan emerged from underground. He removed a golden talisman from his own glabella, then carefully stowed it away as he murmured to himself. Those bastards are planning to destroy the entire secret area. Looks like I have to get out of this place right away. He then swept a sleeve through the air, and a golden longsword and a yellow seal appeared before him. These were none other than the primordial ancient sword and the vast earth seal that he had taken from the five-elemental Great Annihilation formation. And a pleased smile appeared on his face at the sight of them. I may have almost lost my life here, but it's all worth it in the end. After that, he stowed the two immortal treasures away, then took a glance at the chaotic battlefield in the distance as he murmured to himself, "You guys can keep fooling around over there. I'm getting out of here." As soon as his voice trailed off, he spotted a streak of blue light flying through the air overhead, and it seemed to be Lan Yan. His brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, following which he also departed as a streak of golden light. At the same time, the area outside the Ian Pagoda had already descended into complete chaos. A series of massive cracks had begun to appear over the entire pagoda, within which silver light was flashing incessantly, giving off bursts of formidable spatial fluctuations. Before long, a steady stream of living beings of all types of different descriptions began rushing out of the silver light, and their cultivation bases varied drastically as well. The cultivators stationed outside the pagoda were naturally quite startled by this, and they tried to flee the scene, but many of the living beings that flew out of the Ian Pagoda immediately attacked them on sight, leaving them with no choice but to stand and fight. Initially, they were able to hold a comfortable upper hand thanks to their numbers advantage, but as more and more of these living beings continued to stream out of the pagoda, the tables gradually began to turn, and a horrific battle ensued in which both sides suffered severe casualties. Li. Meanwhile, Han Li and Klin were flying toward Chi Mozi, and even from afar, they could see Worm 3's reincarnation spirit domain, which encompassed an area that was hundreds of kilometers in size. Inside her dark red spirit domain was another golden spirit domain, and that was none other than Chi Mozi's time spirit domain. Upon flying into the two spirit domains, Lekima was instantly slowed down significantly. An alarmed look appeared on its face, and gusts of fierce, white wind began sweeping out of its hooves, stirring up the surrounding space and restoring much of its original speed. In the instant that Han Li and Klin flew onto the scene, the former immediately released his own time spirit domain to encompass the two of them, and they discovered that Chi Mozi was already locked in a battle against Worm 3 and the others. "Hand over what you obtained from the altar and we'll let you go," Worm 3 yelled. "What threat do you pose to me now that I have the Ian Divine Lamp?" Chi Mozi harumphed coldly. "What if we throw ourselves into the mix as well?" Han Li asked, and Chi Mozi's expression instantly changed slightly at the sight of him, Lekima, and Klin. Worm 3 and the others were already quite troublesome to deal with, so he would certainly struggle immensely to take on Han Li's trio in addition to them. On top of that, Klin, Liu Zizai, and Lekima were all great encompassment cultivators, so even with the Ian Divine Lamp in his possession, this was still clearly a losing battle. However, instead of displaying any fear or timidity, a sly grin appeared on his face as he flipped a hand over to produce a palm-sized, crimson tablet. "This is your bonded soul tablet, right? If you don't want me to destroy it, then kill him," Chi Mozi commanded as his gaze fell upon Liu Zizai. Liu Zizai could see that Chi Mozi was pointing directly at Han Li, and a hesitant look appeared on his face. "Hurry up or I'll crush this tablet right now," Chi Mozi threatened in a menacing fashion. "My apologies." A hint of indignation flashed through Liu Zizai's eyes, following which he began to fly toward Han Li, only to be intercepted by Klin. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, old man Liu." Lekima hesitated momentarily, then conjured up a massive tornado that swept up Klin and Liu Zizai before sending them flying far away into the distance. "How about now? With those three gone, do you still dare to challenge me?" Chi Mosey sneered. Han Li, Fox 3, and Worm 3 exchanged a glance and a nod, and the three of them split up to surround Chi Mosey in a triangular formation. "I admire your courage, but I'm assuming your courage only stands on the basis that you don't know the true power of the Ian Divine Lamp," Chi Mosey sneered, and a hint of foreboding welled up in the hearts of Han Li's trio upon hearing this. "Let me show you what you're dealing with," Chi Mosey declared as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing the Ian Divine Lamp, while began to revolve incessantly before him. His aura instantly began to swell drastically as his robes flapped audibly despite the absence of wind, and a golden torch emerged in front of him. A fervent look appeared in his eyes as his gaze fell upon the torch and the Ian Divine Lamp, and countless rays of golden light instantly erupted out of the flame at the center of the lamp, making it resemble a dazzling, golden sun that was hanging in the sky, releasing layers upon layers of golden ripples that caused the nearby clouds to churn violently. The sense of foreboding in Han Li's heart instantly became more pronounced upon seeing this, and he hurriedly yelled, "Stop him!" At the same time, he channeled his heavenly baleful purgatory arts with all his might, while sweeping a sleeve through the air to release 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, which combined to form a single sword that hurtled directly toward Chi Mosey. Worm 3 immediately followed his lead, releasing an octagonal badge, which in turn released a huge cloud of dark red mist that formed an imposing wall before advancing toward Chi Mosey. At the same time, Fox 3 lashed out with his heavenly fox bloodform saber, unleashing a massive crimson blade projection that was several thousand feet in length, slicing through the very heavens en route to Chi Mosey. Their attacks were all extremely formidable, and even the average great encompassment cultivator definitely wouldn't have dared to disregard them. However, Chi Mosey seemed to have been completely oblivious to the danger that he was in, as he focused the entirety of his attention on bringing his time-severing torch and the Ian Divine Lamp together. Right as the attacks from Han Li's trio were about to fall upon him, the time-severing torch and the Ian Divine Lamp finally fused together, and in the same instant, a burst of blinding, golden light was released. The golden light was countless times brighter than even the light of the sun, forcing Han Li's trio to shield their own eyes. Han Li heard a resounding boom coming from Chi Mosey's direction, immediately following which he was sent flying back through the air in an involuntary fashion by a burst of tremendous force. After steadying himself, Han Li immediately made a beckoning motion to draw on his azure bamboo cloudswarm sword back into his grasp, following which he cast his gaze toward Chi Mosey, and he was greeted by the sight of an enormous shadow that resembled a giant pillar. However, it was only after the smoke cleared that he discovered that the so-called giant pillar was actually none other than the Ian Divine Lamp, which had swelled to over 1,000 feet tall. "Is that the Ian Divine Lamp?" Worm 3 exclaimed. Han Li turned to her to discover that her hair was a little messy and disheveled, but she was unharmed. "It looks like he must have used some type of secret technique to completely take control of the Ian Divine Lamp. However, there's no way that he can keep this up for long, so we just have to weather the storm," Han Li said with slightly furrowed brows. "I don't think it's that simple," Fox 3 said as he flew over to join them, and he was also looking a little disheveled. "Even though he somehow made the lamp expand to such an enormous size, its aura has remained completely restrained and self-contained, and that's not normal at all." "You're right," Han Li said as a grim look appeared on his face. "Chi Mosey has somehow managed to fuse the Ian Divine Lamp with his spirit domain, making it resemble a domain spirit of sorts. This could spell trouble for us." Right at this moment, Chi Mosey appeared on the Ian divine lamp, standing on one of its lotus flower petals as he looked down at Han Li's trio with a triumphant smile on his face. "What do you think of your chances now, fellow Taoist Han?" he yelled in a goading voice. Before Han Li had a chance to reply, he cast an incantation seal into the lamp beneath him, and it shuddered violently, as did the flame within it, which then exploded into countless golden fireballs that erupted in all directions. Han Li's trio hurriedly scattered to take evasive measures upon seeing this. After the golden fireballs landed on the ground, they refused to dissipate. Instead, they transformed into countless golden lamps, each of which was around 10 feet tall, resembling miniature clones of the massive Ian divine lamp. These golden lamps were littered throughout the entire spirit domain, with one present roughly every 100 or so feet. Han Li quickly discovered that with the emergence of these miniature lamps, the time-law power fluctuations in Chi Mosey's spirit domain had swelled in potency by tenfold. So even though Han Li's trio were sheltered within his time-spirit domain, their movements were still severely inhibited. Right at this moment, Chi Mosey swept both sleeves through the air, and countless specks of red light flew out from within, instantly taking up a large section of the sky above. "Those are Fire Age fireflies," Han Li yelled in an alarmed manner, and as soon as his voice trailed off, the swarm of Fire Age fireflies split up into 3 before flying toward Han Li's trio. Worm 3 and Fox 3 hurriedly adopted defensive measures to protect themselves upon hearing this. A layer of silver light that was riddled with runes emerged over Worm 3's robes, giving off a burst of spatial law powers that enveloped her entire body. Meanwhile, a suit of silver armor emerged over Fox 3's body, covering him from head to toe.